And we're live. Hopefully. Without the wait. Yes, yes. I think we might be. Looks like everyone's just getting ready to come back from the lunch break. Hope everyone's doing all right here. I believe we're still with Dianne Deans and Rebecca Jones, counsel for former Chief Slowly. I think Rebecca Jones will be continuing her line of questioning as soon as we get back in here. Check, check.
Order allowed.
Yeah, we had to go away there. Last night was a really long night. We did some really
The commission
late
is
lives.
reconvened. La commission reprend.
I don't think I'm going to do that again with the late lives. Welcome back, everyone. We're ready to go. Dacey's on the move. He'll be joining us in a bit for some commentary. There's Mr. Rollo, who shares his name with the town of Saskatchewan.
I'm going to turn now, Councillor
Corner
Deans,
gas
to planning. And we heard a lot of evidence this morning about the plan. So you testified that there is always some tension between the police and the Police Services Board about the sharing of operational planning details, right?
Right.
And we spoke before the break about the sensitivity of intelligence information, and I suggest to you that there are very similar sensitivities involved in sharing operational information.
Yep.
The information of police operations is considered highly confidential for safety reasons,
Right.
including the safety of officers.
Right.
And as chief of police, the safety of officers would be of the utmost importance, right?
Of course.
And like in the case of intelligence reports, it was not the practice of the board to demand operational planning information prior to the convoy, right?
I don't think we demanded operational planning information. I think we, inquired about operational issues in accordance with what we understood that limit to be under the Act.
Fair. So prior to the convoy, you wanted some high-level operational information, but you weren't asking for tactical plans, for example.
No,
You agree with me on that?
I do.
Okay. But here with the convoy, everyone was under a tremendous amount of pressure.
A lot.
Okay. And you were under a tremendous amount of pressure,
Yes,
as was Chief Slowly.
yes,
And you and the board started wanting more information about the operational plans, right?
that's fair. Yep.
And you'll agree with me that it was a highly volatile situation during the Freedom Convoy.
I will.
And there were threats, as you testified this morning, to members of the board, right? There were threats to Chief Slowly. There were threats to the mayor, right? Yes?
Yes, yes.
And you also testified this morning about leaks of sensitive information from the board, right?
Yes,
Yes. And that there had been leaks of information from the board in the past. Is that fair?
it is fair.
Okay. And Commission Counsel also showed you an email from one board member, Mr. Swida, asking for more information about the planning, correct? And I'm sorry, if you can just say yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry.
I know that's fine. And Mr. Swida, a few weeks later, stepped down from the board. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. And he stepped down from the board
Yes.
after evidence emerged that he had attended the Freedom Convoy protests on 2 occasions, right?
I don't know if that's why he,
The lady in blue, that's Ottawa City Councillor Dianne Deans and former chair of the Ottawa Police Services Board.
and I was left with the definite impression that they got pushed out.
Okay. Were you aware of the media reports at the time that he had attended the convoy protests and wouldn't answer questions about whether or not he had donated food to the protesters?
Yes.
Okay. An example of the lack of operational detail that you felt you were getting was in relation to the operation at Rideau and Sussex, right?
Again, Rideau
An
and Sussex.
example of it, yes.
Yes.
Keep mentioning Rideau and
And-
Sussex.
You told the commissioner that you were told there was going to be an operation in advance, right?
Yes,
And you were told some details of that operation?
not a lot, but a very, very high level.
Right. You were given high-level details of a police operation, right?
Yes,
Okay. And that is the kind of details that the board gets about police operations, right?
in Ottawa, that's the kind of detail we were accustomed to getting.
Okay. But you didn't get, as you put it, the full plan for the operation, right?
No, or even as much information as after I had seen that Toronto report, I thought they were getting.
Okay. Well, I think this is before the Toronto report.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
But no, okay, carry on.
Okay. So you've been following the evidence in this commission so far?
Yes,
Okay. So I take it that you've heard the evidence that the operation at Rideau and Sussex was seen to be a particularly sensitive operation,
yes,
right?
correct.
There was reports that there were people involved from criminal organizations in Quebec?
I heard that evidence.
Right. Okay. And so you would
Here we go
agree
again
with
the
me
Fafada.
that with a board with a history of leaks, may be a little bit concerning to share the full plan of operational details of going into Rideau and Sussex. Is that fair?
No, I don't think I would agree with you on that. As chair of the board, any highly sensitive information that was being shared with the board, I would have really, read the riot act to the board members about confidentiality and reminded them of their oath that they took when they joined that board and the sensitive nature and the potential for putting officers in harm's way by leaking that information. So no, I don't think I can fully accept your premise.
Okay, well, maybe you'll fully accept this,
Okay.
that for Chief Slowly, he would be concerned about his officers going into an operation like that.
Absolutely.
Okay. And you were asked by my friend for the commission whether you were ever offered by Chief Slowly to have a member of the board embedded within the police service, like we heard about in Toronto, right? And you weren't asked whether you asked whether you could be embedded or someone could be embedded within the police service.
I don't believe we asked.
Okay. And in terms of your evidence about the plan and your concerns about the plan, just for the benefit of the public and for the commissioner, I take it that you are not commenting on the sufficiency or the appropriateness of the plan. That would go beyond your expertise.
Correct.
Okay. And so what we can take from you was your concern solely about the level of detail you and the board were given about the plans.
Like to have seen more detail. I'd also like to have been able to greater satisfy ourselves that there was a plan.
Well, you were assured there was a plan and you were given details about that plan, I suggest to you, daily by Chief Slowly.
What days are we talking about? We were seeing more details of a plan as we went on, but for a lot of those 20 days, I did not feel that I was getting detailed information about a plan.
Right. And I hear you about that.
Okay.
And what I'm trying to establish here is that what you were not satisfied with was the information you were getting, the level of detail you were getting about the operational plan, correct?
Yes, and for at least a considerable amount of the time that there was a full plan.
Well, you understood, as Chief Slowly said repeatedly, in board meetings and council meetings that are recorded, that the plan was well in hand and was evolving as information evolved, right?
Yes.
Okay. So I want to talk now a bit about resources. I think you gave evidence that you first heard about the OPS requiring more resources around February 1.
Yeah.
Okay. And just to refresh your memory about that, and I can put the documents up if you'd like, you were actually signing memorandums of understanding for additional police officers from before the convoy arrived in Ottawa.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So you knew from before the convoy arrived that Chief Slowly was making efforts to secure additional resources.
Yeah, I think that was sort of standard practice in some large-scale events that the city hosted in the past, that there was sharing of some resources at that level.
Exactly. And actually, that's exactly what I wanted to get to with you, which is that is how resources are in the ordinary course obtained, right? For big protests or big events.
Yes.
Okay. They're obtained by Chief Slowly drawing on his police relationships.
Yes.
Okay. And that's what he was doing from before the convoy arrived, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
It's all about
And
slowly.
You have no basis, I take it, to disagree with me that he was doing that on a near constant basis during the convoy, reaching out for additional resources.
Yeah, it amped up as time went on.
And it amped up.
Yes.
Exactly. And what was exceptional here was not that Chief Slowly was asking for additional resources, although the extent to which he was asking was exceptional. What was exceptional here was that he was asking for so much help from the board in getting those resources, right? We saw the February 3rd email where he wrote to you and said, I need your help getting resources.
Yep.
Right. And that wasn't usual, correct?
No, it wasn't usual.
It was unusual. And so that when you get to the February 5th meeting where you say to him, I want to hear what you need, he had already been asking for help from the board.
He had been asking for help, but he hadn't, it's like, send more resources, but I didn't have the information, what that actually looked like, how much.
The numbers.
The numbers.
The numbers.
What would it take? And he had made that comment, as you will recall, he had made that comment about not being certain that there was a policing solution. So, yeah, with all of that, it's like, yeah, we need to understand this better.
Right, and you understood his comment about there not being a policing solution, or there may not be a policing solution, to be a call for help,
I
right?
did, yes,
Okay.
very much so.
And the call for help was, we cannot, as the local police of jurisdiction, do this on our own.
Yes,
Okay, and you understood it that way, and he also explained it that way. We saw it up on the screen, right?
yes,
He explained, we need the help from all levels of government.
yes,
And people, you say, didn't understand that comment, right? When he first made it?
yes.
Okay. And,
Wow. Just goes
but
on.
you've said publicly, and we all know now, that he was right.
I believe he was very right.
He was just right earlier than a lot of other people.
He probably had more information than everyone else, but yeah, I think the way this all ended actually did prove that Chief Slowly, what he said early on, was in fact correct.
Now, Chief Slowly, after getting the board's request on February 5th for a number, more details about resources, the next day he provided that number and you were satisfied, and the mayor has given evidence that he was satisfied with the level of detail of that request. Yes?
Yes,
Okay. And my friend asked, you know, was it ever suggested to you that he asked for twice as many resources as he needed? What you weren't asked was to confirm that he was right about that too, wasn't he?
what he asked for?
Yes.
I believe that he was right about what he asked for.
Okay. Now, I'm going to turn to Chief Slowly's resignation. You gave evidence that a week before his resignation, you called him as part of a wellness check.
Well, I was in constant touch with Chief Slowly, but we were chatting about, we had a lot of stuff to talk about, but I also wanted to make sure that he was okay and that he was aware of, what was happening in the broader community. And so we did speak about that.
Okay. And during that conversation, you expressed to him that a lot of people wanted his head.
I don't know if it's those exact words, but in a broad sense, he knew that, I knew that. There were calls for his resignation and I probably crassly described it, but I think the sentiment was clear.
Okay. And just to be fair to you, I'm going to suggest to you that he didn't say, cut me a check, I'm not resigning, but rather, I'm not resigning, so if you want me out, you're going to have to buy out my contract.
No, that might be what happened the next week in terms of closer to what you're suggesting. But the first week, I think as I said this morning, I wasn't certain of what he was trying to convey. Was it just the frustration of the moment, or is it something he actually had in his mind? I didn't have a sense of that. I didn't pursue it. Right. I had just heard that comment, and it may have been, and I said this morning, it may have just been off the cuff, and he may not have meant it at all. I didn't know. I didn't pursue it, so I didn't know. I followed up on it a week later.
Right. And then, so a week later, you called him again, and we're right now in the middle of the crisis, right?
Yes.
And you asked him about resigning, right?
I asked him if what he had said the week previous was what he was thinking about.
And you testified that, as far as you saw, he was never supported by the senior command?
There were problems in the senior command.
Okay. And is it fair to say that that call on that evening of the 14th, asking him about resigning, would have felt to him like a loss of support by his board?
It wasn't intended to be that. It was, I don't know how he would interpret it. I was concerned for him. As I said this morning, I was concerned for the story that was going to be coming out from CBC that was casting him in a particularly dark light. I didn't know how much he could withstand, and I wasn't doing it to suggest in any way that he should leave. And when he said no, he was going to see it through that evening, I said, that's fine, Chief. I didn't want to leave him with the impression that we were pushing him out. That wasn't the case. It was a conversation. I probably knew more about some council motive than he did, because I hadn't shared that with him. And I just thought it was going to be a tough few days.
Very briefly on the CBC article, the article you're referring to refers to confidential sources, including within the OPS, about tension, raised voices during the crisis, correct?
Correct.
And is it fair that we've seen footage, for example, of the February 16th council meeting, that there were a lot of raised voices to go around in this period?
Oh my goodness, yes.
Everyone had difficult days during this period?
Yes.
Okay. And I can see from the commissioner that I'm out of time, but I do have, Mr. Commissioner, some more questions for this witness. I would ask for leave for a few more minutes to continue my cross-examination.
Make it very short, please.
Okay. If we can pull up, please, OPB 1649. And if we could go to page 6, please. These are the minutes, in-camera minutes of the Ottawa Police Service Board on February 15th. And this was the day of Chief Slowly's resignation, correct?
Mm-hmm.
If you can scroll, oh, there we go. So in the first big paragraph, we see at the top, a point was raised regarding Mr. Slowly having struggled to be accepted within the organization, given that he was considered an outsider, and you've given evidence about that, correct?
Yes.
And then the last sentence of that paragraph reads, in conversation with Chair Deans the week prior, Deputy Chief Bell had advised that he would not have done anything differently if he were in charge, right?
Yes. Yes,
And Deputy Chief Bell told you that?
he did.
Okay.
It's literally just like high school drama club, and they're just talking about, did this one say that? Did this one say that? It's all about trying to like throw Slowly under the bus or find somebody to blame for all of this. And I noticed that they mentioned the group at Rideau and Sussex again, and the group from Quebec. I think they're talking about far off, however you say it. And the narrative's really building there, right, Chris?
Right?
Yes.
Right.
First Black Ottawa, right? With me that it would be to lay blame for the events of the Freedom Convoy on the feet of Chief Slowly alone.
Alone? Absolutely.
That's the quiet part out loud.
There's a lot of blame
Yeah.
to go around.
A lot of blame to go around, a lot of things that we can learn about how things could have gone differently, correct?
Oh, correct.
Opponents are not blaming the convoy.
But as you've confirmed, you never lost
all blaming
confidence
each other.
in your chief of police during this entire event.
I did not.
Okay, those are my questions. Thank you, Commissioner.
Okay, thank you. Next on the list, we have the Ottawa Coalition.
Oh, here comes Paul Champ.
Thank you, Commissioner and Ms. Deans. My name is Paul Champ. I'm legal counsel for the Ottawa Coalition of Residents and Businesses. Just have some questions for you further to your testimony this morning. Ms. Deans, I just want to ask you first about the context or the environment with the Ottawa Police Service immediately preceding the Freedom Convoy. This was a bit of a tough time for the Ottawa Police. Would you agree?
Yes.
There had been a series of scandals. You had a Deputy Chief Jaswal had been suspended due to sexual harassment allegations. There'd been a termination of the CO, the Chief Administration Officer. There were workplace reviews that were coming out of low morale and harassment and discriminatory attitudes in the police. These were all the things that were going on just in the previous year. Is that fair?
That is fair.
And when you referred to this morning about the Ottawa Police was flying with one wing to some extent, you meant that there was only one permanent deputy chief, that being Deputy Chief Bell, and then the other deputy chief position had a number of rotating superintendents. Is that what you meant?
That's what I meant.
And we know that acting Deputy Chief Ferguson, who was in charge of this operation, was one of those superintendents who was just acting deputy chief at that time.
Correct.
So presumably had a bit less experience than others who would have been in that role otherwise.
Right.
Now, turning to the Freedom Convoy, and just before the arrival, as a layperson, I think you told us this morning that you were following the news, you were following some social media, and you saw the huge number of trucks that were rumbling across the country, and you saw the millions of dollars being raised in GoFundMe. And on that basis, you had concerns that these protesters looked like they were planning to stick around for a while. Is that right?
I was concerned.
And were you aware that some police intelligence at that time, I think we're going to hear about that evidence later today, were that some of these protesters were saying they planned to stay in Ottawa until their demands were met. Were you aware of that?
I don't think I was aware of that.
But notwithstanding all of this, Chief Soley was reassuring you that in their assessment, based on all the other inputs they had, that they believe that the Freedom Convoy protesters were going to be moving out by the Monday. Is that right?
Yes.
But did he give you any indication whether the Ottawa Police had a contingency plan in the event that didn't happen?
Yeah, I don't believe I was aware of a contingency plan.
Okay. And Councillor Deans, looking at one of the documents that's referred to in your interview summary about some texts that you were having with Deputy Chief Bell on January the 31st, just after the weekend, where you asked him how we can ensure that no more trucks are allowed into this city. We had all these trucks that were gridlocking downtown, and you want to know that there were no more trucks allowed in, and Deputy Chief Bell told you that no more trucks could drive into that area now. Do you recall getting that assurance?
If it's in a text message, I guess I got it. There was a lot of text messages.
I think, yeah, for sure. Not with the mayor, but we'll get to that one in a moment. But but there were more trucks coming in after that first weekend, correct?
Yes, there were.
And did you ever get any answer to that from either Deputy Chief Bell or Chief Soley about why more trucks were being allowed into downtown Ottawa after that first weekend?
Yeah, there were a number of questions being asked about that because, at one hand, first they were telling us that there was a constitutional right, there was nowhere else to put the trucks, they were allowed to come, then it was like, we're going to try and keep them out, and then they're coming in. It was a fluid situation.
Just a brief question about your telephone conversation with City Solicitor David White about the potential for an injunction. I've had some conversations with council, and I'm going to ask you a question that doesn't get to the substance of what Mr. White was advising you, but Mr. White did express to you that they did not have a plan to go for an injunction, correct?
Yes.
It's really weird,
And
this whole thing.
now, did he say it was because of one of two reasons? One, that there was concerns that the Ottawa Police would be unable to enforce an injunction, or was he suggesting that they would be concerned about their reputation if they were unsuccessful, that they might be embarrassed if the court
Daisy?
denied their injunction?
I can hear you.
Well, I think it
okay?
was the latter and perhaps partially the
I'm just
former
trying to figure
too.
out this YouTube thing.
Is that what he expressed to you?
Yeah, that's an issue.
Yeah.
No, yeah, and that's
I
the
don't
channel
know if I'm allowed to tell you what he told me.
I hear you.
We've been permissive. I think that's
just not working.
the end of the discussion.
Did Mr. White tell you who would make the decision or who was responsible for making the decision?
Mr. Kanelakis.
The city manager.
He gets a lot of
and Mr.
he gets a lot of
Kanellakos, he's
procedural
the
interruptions.
City manager later
Mr.
on
Champ.
referred to Ms. Exley, the person who did get an injunction, as some 20-year-old. That's the same.
We
city
can't see those notes.
It is. It's the only city manager.
Now, you testified this morning, Councillor Deans, that you weren't aware that the OPP and the RCMP were perhaps delaying deployment of officers or resources because they had some concerns about the OPS operational plans. You never had heard about that before, is that right?
No, and I listened to the testimony, and I have to say I was angered by it. I really believe that the oversight body could have usefully used that information in the performance of our duty. And I listened to the testimony from Mr. Kanellakos, where he said, well, it was operational. There was no need to give it to Councillor Deans or the board, and I respectfully disagree with that.
What could the board have done with that information?
Well, we certainly could have questioned, we could have asked, what is it about the plan that is insufficient to gain resources? What do they need? I think there was a lot we could have done. I think our focus would have perhaps shifted to that plan and what we needed to shore up the plan to get resources rather than just asking for resources. But we didn't have that information.
Huh.
And had you heard concerns that that the OPP were raising concerns that their officers at times were being misdeployed, sent one place and then sent to another, and time was being wasted, and they had concerns about that? I think we're going to hear about that for a minute.
Yeah, no, that information was not shared with the board.
And Ms. Deans, did you, when we were getting later into the protest and there was all these concerns or this or that happening, did you ever speak to either the deputy chiefs about, what was happening, whether they had concerns about how things were unfolding or what the Ottawa Police, how the Ottawa Police were responding?
I phoned Deputy Chief Bell one day.
Huh.
I mean, I felt that I had a
Interesting.
pretty good relationship with him, and it was an, just between him and I conversation, which obviously it's not now, but I intended it to be then.
Ooh, were
And
they
I
flirting?
just said to him,
Do you think they were
Deputy
flirting,
Chief Bell,
chat?
I just wanted to ask you one question. If you
Maybe.
were the chief right now, what would you be doing differently? And his answer was very simple. It was nothing.
And so from that, you drew that there was no concerns at the senior command with Chief Slows' leadership per se.
I don't know if that's what I drew from it. I just drew from it that they wouldn't be doing anything
Wouldn't have been doing
different.
Fair enough. Now, I want to turn just a bit to your relationship with Mayor Watson. If you, while you were chair of the board, if you ever wanted to have a private conversation with Mayor Watson, could you just call him?
No.
And why was that?
I asked Mayor Watson early on in my tenure as chair of the Police Services Board if he would share his phone number with me in order that we could converse. And I mean, in times like this in particular, it was actually during the protests of the Black Lives Matter, and you probably recall that there was a lot of tension during that particular protest, and I had gone through his chief of staff to get to him, and I said, could you just give me your phone number? Because like, it would just be easier if I could phone you when there are issues that are, on the front burner and urgent. And he just said, no. He said he doesn't answer his phone. He doesn't usually have it on. Nobody has the number, and no.
With some of these other key players that we've heard about, Chief Slowly, Deputy Chief Bell, Mr. Arpan himself, City Manager Kanalakos, you had all of their numbers and communicated with them, right?
Yes, yes.
And is it fair to say over the years, Councillor Deans, you've had a number of political disagreements with Mayor Watson? Is that fair to say?
Yes.
You've
Yes.
both been on city council in one fashion or another for 2 decades or more?
Yes.
And just prior to the Freedom Convoy or around that time, you had been, you'd indicated an intention that you planned to run for mayor this year at that time?
In December, yes.
And did Mayor Watson ever speak to you about that, about whether he thought it was a good thing for you to run for mayor or not? Did he say anything to you about that?
No.
And notwithstanding your political history with the mayor, did you believe that all of Ottawa needed to respond as one team to this crisis?
Absolutely. I think I described that this morning. Like, you can have disagreements with someone at any point. We're not all going to like each other, but you have to be able to rise above that and work together. And especially in a time of crisis, that has to be entirely set aside. You have to be, as I described this morning, in the same boat, rowing in the same direction.
And in retrospect, Councillor Deans, does it now seem to you that this political rivalry to some extent did in fact interfere with the ability of you to work collaboratively or effectively with the mayor? Or your ability to work together during this crisis?
I mean, it was.
That's just the thing. Talking about Ottawa responding as one team, Ottawa isn't a monolith. We have a lot of different opinions and a lot of different people here, and even in the government. Nobody in the government raised their hand and said, hey, maybe these people are here for a reason? Come on.
I mean, we have political disagreements. It doesn't have to extend to a personal animosity, and I didn't want that. I had spoken to Mayor Watson about that on a number of occasions. I didn't see the benefit of it. So I don't know if I was feeling any need to carry on a rivalry. I was just feeling a need to do my job.
But did you perceive that he had some animosity towards you?
Yes.
Just turning to then, after Chief Slowly resigned and you and the Police Services Board took steps to find a temporary replacement for him, we'd heard Mr. Arpan testify that he had a lot of criticism, or even Mayor Watson, they didn't follow a process and so on and so forth. Why didn't you follow a big, lengthy, extensive process like the 8-month period that we're seeing the Police Services Board now following?
I mean, it's just, to me, the suggestion of that is kind of ridiculous. I mean, you can't go through a protracted process in the middle of an emergency when you're trying to shore up your senior command and make sure that that senior command has the tools in place to address a crisis in your city. And so there was never an intention to hire anyone to be the ongoing chief of police in Ottawa without a process. And I was frustrated that it was characterized. I mean, the mayor's office got ahead of that story in the media by leaking it, which it was confidential information, it was leaked. And they got ahead of that story and characterized it as something quite different than it was intended.
She's really digging her teeth into Watson
You felt
here.
they're playing a bit of politics with you in the midst
And
of this crisis.
Paul Champ really got what he wanted there.
Yeah, I guess.
Dianne Deans said the
I
mayor
guess
had
to a certain
animosity for her.
extent,
That's
that
what he
old
wanted to
maxim
hear.
about
That,
never wasting a
that
good
is an
crisis,
important. But it's all
also
feelings. Where's the
presents
facts?
an
I
opportunity
felt
to
this.
settle
There was
some old
animosity
scores, and I
towards
guess
me.
that's the way
Where's
I
the facts?
view that.
Yeah,
Canadians
that's how you felt.
Yeah.
that you don't agree with, any
I'm
of
not getting
you
into
agree
the
with,
reasons why.
were
You've already
ignored.
explained quite well the rationale
And showed up in
about
Ottawa.
why they were preferring external candidate. But just to be clear, without Mr. Turigian taking over as chief, as a result, left the Ottawa Police Service with an acting chief and 2 acting deputy chiefs. Is that right?
That's right.
So the 3 top positions in the Ottawa Police were all acting.
Senior command
Senior.
is 2 deputies and a chief and the CEO. And as you mentioned, we had released our CEO in the past year, and we had just brought in a new civilian senior member of the command team, Blair Dunker, and she had only just started. So not only did we have everybody in an acting position, we also had a brand new hire in the civilian member of that senior command.
And just taking just a half a step back, you told us about you got wind over the weekend of a potential motion by City Council to call for the removal or resignation of Chief Slowly. And when you heard about that, you contacted Mr. Arpan. Is that right?
Yes.
Mr. Mayor Watson's chief of staff. Now, Mr. Arpan testified that he communicated to you that such a motion would be a bad idea. He didn't, that you needed to work together to try to stop such a motion. Is that what he told you?
We had some text exchanges. I know that they've been provided to you about this, but yeah, I think, he intimated through that at that point, they weren't going to agree to it. But there was a lot of room for that to change in the conversation. And there was one text, he said, I forget what he's referring to now, but he said, if Peter's that stupid, then it's his own funeral. So, he didn't give me any confidence that the mayor's office, and I described before the strong mayor model before Doug Ford even conceived of a strong mayor model. We had one in Ottawa that was devised by the mayor at the beginning of the term, and that our mayor could really win any vote and, have any resolution put on the floor of council or not have a resolution, as the case may be, put on the floor of council. So it was always with the consent of the mayor that what council was dealing with.
So if I understand what you're telling us, is that notwithstanding Mr. Arpan saying to you, reassuring you that, the mayor wouldn't necessarily support such a motion, you yourself had concerns that he might flip suddenly and then support a motion like that without notice.
I didn't hear anything that was telling me that motion wouldn't come forward. There was some hesitation there that didn't give me relief. And when I say that any motion wouldn't come to the floor of council without the consent of the mayor, I'm talking about with his 15 members of council that, always vote with him. There
We'll
are
say it,
other
Watson.
more
Yeah.
often referred to as the Watson Club. But the independent members of council may well have brought a motion, but that group usually worked with the mayor in lockstep.
Now, turning to your telephone call with the mayor the morning after Chief Sloly had resigned, and you were about to later that day announce that a new chief had been hired, correct?
Correct?
And so we've heard testimony from you already and Mayor Watson about it, and we've got this recorded conversation. I just want to ask you, did you record that conversation with the mayor because you didn't trust him completely? Is that fair?
Yes.
And, oh, by the way, incidentally, were you aware when you were having that conversation with the mayor that the mayor's staff were already working on a motion to remove you? Were you aware at that time?
I'd heard it.
This is like high school drama club here now.
But he didn't.
Are you
tell
aware the
that.
mayor
That's-
was
that's what
working
he's
behind
trying
your
to do.
back? This is Paul Champ. He's
No,
leading the
I knew
lawsuit
it.
against the convoy.
Yes, Machiavelli had nothing on our mayor. Thank you very much, Ms. Deans. That's all I have.
Thank you. So the next up is the Ottawa Police Service.
If I might raise this matter, I understand that there is going to be, that the recording, the audio recording was going to be played. I understand that that request has been made, and we are not opposed to it. And I would suggest that if it is going to be played, that it be played now before I start my cross-examination.
Okay, so just to get confirmation, is there any objection to the recording being played?
No, Mr. Commissioner, the city consents.
Seeing no objection, we'll sit back and listen to the witness in her own words and the witness from yesterday. Okay, is that, has been lined up? Are we able to do that now, or is that a problem?
I believe we can. This has sort of just been dealt with on the fly, but I believe the hearings clerk has it. It's POE.OPB 000001.
This is very efficient, eh? Okay, Madam Clerk, if you could play it.
Jessica and Serge. Hi, John.
Hi, I've got Serge in the room with me.
Hi, Serge.
There.
Okay, well, go ahead.
Sorry, so I'm hoping that I can get a briefing on next steps with respect to chief, acting chief, and what those steps are in terms of bringing some stability to the organization.
So basically, I'm going to sign a contract with a new chief today, and I believe he will start on Monday. And,
You're going to be today?
pardon me?
You're bringing a new chief today?
Monday. He's going to start on Monday.
Who is this, and how did you find him or her?
So his name's Matt Trinigan, and he's former chief of Waterloo. You might actually know him, Jim. He was a deputy minister, maybe when you were in Ontario. But he is extremely well respected in the police world. And the Solicitor General's office helped us, gave us a short list. We called the people on the short list. And he's going to bring a team with him, basically of some former chiefs with a lot of depth of knowledge that are going to come in to assist him in getting this thing to an end. And it's a short term, like, the way the contract is going to work is it's going to be somewhere between like a couple of months and the year end. I'm thinking probably the year end so the new board can choose the new chief, but it's basically a sort of a semi-permanent contract. It's for sort of 3 months to 10 months.
So this is obviously a surprise.
But that's why I thought you might want to know. Yeah.
Well, what happens to Steve?
Well, Steve will be the deputy chief. I mean, the way I see it is that this is probably going to save Steve's opportunity to become the next chief, because you know the poison environment that we have right now. Anybody we put in there is not going to last very long, and Steve's going to get blamed for this. So he will be deputy chief and continue that way, and then I think we'll have the opportunity to become the next chief.
Well, this is, I guess the problem I have with this is there's been no process. There's no transparency. There's no sending out a call for people to apply, and we're in the midst of a crisis, and he's been the acting chief for 1 day, and he's going to be replaced tomorrow.
I mean, I feel like he knows that, because I had a conversation with him yesterday, and I sort of intimated to him that
They
we're
knew-
looking to bring someone
They
in
knew
with,
what was happening, and
knowledge
damn right I called
experience and
it.
a team with them to bring this thing to an end.
That's the end of Dianne Deans,
And,
folks.
you know, I said
Shipped
to
and
him, I
sealed,
recognize
signed
if we
and
were to
delivered.
put you in there right
you
now,
later.
like, you own this. I phoned him last week,
Oh,
by the
she's
way, Jim,
finished.
and I asked him what he would do differently if he was the chief right now, and he said nothing, which didn't
Oh, that's the end
instill a
of
lot
her.
of confidence, actually. But I think in the long term that he will have a lot better chance of being able to be the chief of police in Ottawa if he doesn't own this right now.
They knew that this would be
Bring this
politically
to the
toxic.
board today.
They knew it
The
would
board's
cost
already
the end of
approved it.
whoever did it. My
When did
God.
they have a meeting to
They
approve
knew
that?
what they were doing. They knew what this was.
Yesterday?
They knew what it was. They knew it was the end of
But
whoever
when
went
you
in
first received
because it
already
wasn't
worked to put in place a
justified,
new command
because
center
it
was
wasn't a
going
righteous
to
action.
chief very soon.
That's
My
why.
understanding was that we were going to get through this with Steve.
Fuck.
So it's a done deal, basically.
Well, I haven't signed the contract. I mean, if you want to tell me that you don't think you want me to sign that contract, I mean, I can go back to the board and tell them that you would rather not. But I actually believe this is the right thing to do, Jim.
Well, I this has come as a big surprise. We're in the eve of some potential action.
The
Obviously,
commissioner
something's
just
gonna
drinking the
happen. We think,
water like that.
I don't have any inside information, but one assumes in the next couple of
Oh
days.
boy.
I think this would be very destabilizing to the organization to have someone who knows nothing about Ottawa, who's, I don't know, this guy, don't recognize his name. Maybe he was a deputy when I was there, but it doesn't ring a bell.
He is very well liked. The Solicitor General told me that the Solgen's office, our advisor on our board, is a guy named Graham White. He told me that he called it an elegant solution. He thinks it's a very good solution on an interim basis for Ottawa.
Anyways, I don't support this. I think this is the wrong approach at the wrong time. We're going into the midst of what could be a very serious operational activity, and the sideshow becomes, oh, by the way, Steve, we're shunning you aside to a guy who doesn't know where Queen Street is. Right?
I respectfully disagree. Like, I really believe that this is, one, in Steve's interest, and two, in the community interest, to get some people with a lot more depth in this kind of stuff than we have internally to Ottawa Police right now to get this done. And, Steve, there's a lot of internal angst. I don't know how familiar you are with it, Jim, but there's a lot of internal angst in that organization. I was just talking to someone right now that was telling me how they've been called off, and Steve's part of it. So there's internal angst in the top ranks right now And they're infighting. You probably know a little bit about the infighting that's been going on in the top ranks. But I really think actually bringing someone that rises above that wouldn't be a bad idea.
Well, I guess the process has been obviously secretive. You've had no opportunity to consult the BIPOC community or other members.
No, it's only a short-term solution. It's not the next chief of Ottawa. It's an interim until we do a search for a chief. I mean, I can't put Steve Bell in there to be the new chief without a search either.
No.
This is protecting him.
Mind-blowing.
Well, no,
I'm just posting an update about it.
He's entitled to apply like anyone else is, who has the
can't get my audio back,
qualifications.
thanks.
So, you know, I don't think there's a conflict because he's the acting chief that he can apply. But right now, it's basically a sole
This is a
source
huge
contract
thing.
that we've.
This actually,
we're about to
this is
sign.
bigger than they think it is,
Which
because it
I
shows that they
fundamentally-
knew they needed a fall guy for the chief.
Anyways, you know,
It shows that they know that they needed somebody to take the fall for this, that it would be politically unpopular, because what they did was wrong. It was wrong, and they knew it was wrong. They wanted to protect Steve Bell and his ability to become the chief of police of Ottawa, so they were going to bring in some sap from Windsor or whatever to come and do it, to come let the cops ride over people, and then make Steve the chief once the political aftermath hit that person. What a joke. What a joke.
And me or the board coming to
The connotations of this are massive. It's way more than a petty Ottawa police and city council and mayor drama. It shows that they knew that this action was going to be bad, and they knew that because it wasn't the righteous, correct thing to do. This shows that they knew it was going to be disgusting and that there was going to be consequences, and they were trying to protect specific people. Sorry, Waterloo. And it shows that they were trying to protect Steve's path to the chief by making somebody else take the fall for it. This deliberately shows that the city of Ottawa, the council, the mayor knew that this was going to be politically dangerous, that this was not the correct thing to do, that it was going to have consequences, and damn right it is.
Okay, Jim, what do you know about what's coming that impacts me today, or the
And that's just what we get to hear.
conversation
Can you
that's
imagine
happening?
other things?
I've worked really hard for the last 20 days. I think it would be a courtesy to at least let me know what's coming at me.
yeah, I'm going to talk to some councillors today, as I try to before every meeting, and see what their plans are, and if I get any sense of what's going on, I'll try to give you a heads up.
Would you support a vote of non-confidence in me?
Haven't decided that yet.
Okay, thanks.
All right. Well, listen, I appreciate the heads up. As I said, I hope that there's that you don't rush into this, because I think it would be a mistake at this point, and I think it would undermine Steve Bell to have someone to come in literally 2 or 3 days after what could have been a police action to try to solve this nightmare we're all living through.
There are a lot of people in the upper ranks, just so you understand, that do not support Steve Bell right now, and it's part of what's happening inside. Do you know? Oh, never mind.
What's the changes to the command structure that you're making? Your press release talked about.
It's the advisory body that would come with this new chief that has OPP and everyone else with that kind of experience in terms of organization to get this done. It's actually a really good plan, Jim.
Yeah. Okay. Well, listen, thank you for the heads up, and we'll see you on Zoom later.
Yeah.
Take care. Bye.
What even to say?
Okay,
What
so
even to
that's.
say to that? Whatever
10
I
minutes
said,
of
I already said what I wanted to
time.
say.
So, go ahead.
That's what I was trying to avoid. Good afternoon, Councillor Deans. My name is David Michikowski. I act for the Ottawa Police Service. Councillor Deans, am I correct that while Chief Slowly was the chief, he had asked for an increase in the number of officers?
Yes?
and officers had been hired over the last several years, but just to cover attrition. There was a hiring freeze, correct?
Yes,
And as of 2022, I understand that Ottawa Police had less officers, sworn officers, than it did in 2019. Is that correct?
I'll take your word for it.
Could I ask you, please, to turn up OPB 01278?
The audio was played, probably ended about 3 minutes
And if we
ago.
could please go to page 4. You'll see this was the meeting that you were at, correct?
Yes,
And at this point, Interim Chief Bell was in command,
yes,
and a question was raised regarding the service's operational plan. And then you got some information from Interim Chief Bell, correct?
yes.
He provided a briefing. And is it fair to say that you got a lot more information as a board on operationally what was going on at the time when Chief Bell became the interim chief?
There was definitely more information provided this day, so yes.
And I believe on page 4, if we go to the paragraph that starts, a question was raised. Yeah, thank you. You'll see a question was raised regarding the ineffective policing having been seen in the city. And it was suggested there were instances in which police could have engaged in enforcement but did not. Am I correct then? The minutes accurately reflect Interim Chief Bell noted that the service had committed to a review of all actions having brought them to their current situation.
Yes,
He indicated he would review it. And then if you look 2 paragraphs later, if you go down to the paragraph, a question was raised regarding why roadblocks had not been installed prior to the arrival of any convoys. The service again noted they were supportive of a full review being conducted to identify any mistakes made or laws that required updating. However, their focus at the time was forward-looking, correct?
yes,
And if you go to page 5, there was a request in the 3rd paragraph for twice daily updates from the service to the board. And this is because the board wanted to get more information than they felt they'd been getting from Chief Slowly. Is that right?
yeah, I mean, things were really heating up, and I think the board was getting more assertive in demanding information, so yes.
And Interim Chief said he supported increased communications with the board, but twice daily updates wouldn't be possible because from a resource point of view,
Yeah, guys,
it's
you could
taking a
just,
lot of command staff
scrub
away
the
from
playback
time
and you'll
that
see it.
is needed operationally, correct?
That's right,
And that seemed reasonable to you.
it did.
You talked about not trusting the mayor. Is that correct?
I don't think I talked about it. I think I confirmed in answer to a question that I had recorded that conversation.
Right. And in fact, the person who recorded it, we can hear at the beginning, is Jessica, correct?
Correct.
That's Jessica Bradley?
My executive assistant.
That's Jessica Bradley?
Yes,
And you asked her to record it.
I did.
And that was a Teams meeting, correct?
Right.
Right. And so Teams has a function in which you can record a meeting, but if you do that, it will show that the meeting is being recorded. So that's not what you did, is it?
That's not what we did. I don't know if I knew that or not. As I said earlier to the commissioner, I'm not the leading most expert in anything technical, but I just wanted to make sure that we had an accurate reflection of that meeting.
And you didn't tell the mayor that you were recording that phone call?
I did not, nor did the mayor mention to
Okay.
me that Steve
All the back and
Kanalakis, the
forth.
city manager, was a silent observer in that room. You heard at the beginning, he said that Serge was in the room, but he failed to mention the city manager was also in the room.
And are you saying that by way of justifying why you recorded it?
No,
You didn't tell him?
I don't feel a need to justify why I recorded it.
You don't have any problems with the ethics of recording a conversation and not telling somebody that you're doing it?
I didn't understand there to be any reason not to, and I could see in this particular tense situation where I was hearing rumors that I was going to be unseated, that there might be a reason for me to file an integrity commissioner complaint later, and an accurate record of our conversation might be in order.
And wouldn't you be able to file an accurate record of the conversation by saying, hey, Mayor, I'm taping this conversation?
Yes, I wouldn't have had any problem with that either. I just failed to do it.
Right.
I don't think it was
Is-
calculated.
And is that something you do regularly, tape
No.
conversations?
It's not.
So this just seemed like a good idea to you at the time?
This was a very tense moment. I've been a member of council for 28 years. I take pride in my reputation. I think I've worked hard for this city and for the citizens of our city. And I could see that, my feeling was that at this point, there was a lot of information that was possessed by senior city officials and the mayor that had not been shared with the board. And they felt no reason to do that, even though we had the political oversight. And the only time we seemed to come into their orbit was when they were looking for a scapegoat.
I take it,
You mean like you
Deans,
were looking
support
for a
openness and
scapegoat by bringing in
transparency.
some putz
I
from
do.
somewhere else
And
to
you would
take the
agree
fall
with
so
me
Steve Bell
that
could become
openness
chief
and
leader?
transparency
My
doesn't
God.
include doing a secret recording of a conversation with the mayor. does it?
I would suggest to you, council, that openness and transparency is providing to a commission a fair and reasonable and accurate description of a conversation. And what I said to the mayor is that if he told me not to go ahead with a motion that had been approved by the board, I wouldn't, but he fell short of that. He said he hoped I would reconsider, but he never told me not to. And so if you want to talk about openness and transparency, maybe we could start there.
Could we go back to my question?
Sure.
My question was, would you agree with me that openness and transparency doesn't support doing a secret recording of a conversation with the mayor?
No, I don't think I would.
You don't agree with that?
No, I think these were tense times, and I think that,
I believe it is.
I felt a need to do that.
And openness and transparency isn't a problem for you?
I think I've been
Wow.
very open and transparent in my career.
I don't think any of you have been open and transparent
And
about
what
anything.
I understood
of
when
you.
I listened to the recording was what you said to the mayor was, if you don't want me to sign the contract, I won't.
There was,
I heard those exact words on the audio.
yes, and then you also
Sorry, I
heard-
haven't asked my question.
Okay, sorry.
And am I correct that that at the end of that and Mayor Watson's response to that comment was, quote, I think it would be destabilizing. I don't favor it. I don't want it to occur. Was there any doubt in your mind after that conversation that Mayor Watson did not support what you were doing?
No, I agree. Mayor Watson did not support what I was doing, but Mayor Watson does not direct the operations of the board. I'm the chair of a board that had taken a decision. And unless the mayor of the city was directing me not to, then I was going to proceed. And I think I made that clear. I mean, I can understand there's some nuance on the tape. I understand that. But I thought I was
Nuance
quite
is on the
clear.
tape.
If you were
The
telling me not
specificity of
to,
the language.
then I won't,
Say it in
and
French.
I'll go back. But he fell short.
My God.
He said he hoped I would reconsider at the end of that message.
Well, aren't we playing word games?
Oh, no,
Ms.
I don't
Deans?
think so.
Well, let me finish my question, if you don't mind. What you said was, quote, "If you don't want me to sign the contract, I won't." And my question to you was there any doubt at the end of that conversation that he did not want you to sign? He can't direct you to not sign it.
No, and I
Just ask the
said,
question, don't add the editorial.
Sure.
yeah, I think there were two parts, but perhaps we'd have to play it again. But I said, if you are telling me not to, I won't.
Okay, so
And I understand there's some nuance on the tape, and perhaps he misunderstood what we were saying to each other. But I thought it was quite clear that unless I had a direction for the mayor of the city of Ottawa to overturn a decision of the oversight body that had been taken, then I would proceed. I report to the board, not to the mayor. I informed the mayor out of courtesy and out of respect for the office of the mayor.
you indicated, I am correct, by the way, when I say the mayor cannot direct you as chair of the Police Services Board to not sign a contract, correct?
Yes, I told him if he did direct me, at that point, I would go back and have another conversation.
One of the things you indicated was that Graham White
Yes.
said that your suggestion of Matt Torrigan was an elegant choice, correct?
An elegant solution, he said.
If I could ask, please, to turn up document ONTO 01121.
Can you repeat the number, Councillor?
I'm sorry, it's ONTO 01121. And you'll see there's an email from Graham White. Graham White was the Police Services Board advisor.
Yes.
And so if you'd be good enough, please, to scroll down. And so, sorry, if we can go up to the first paragraph. Just there, perfect, thank you. Chair Dean stated that Matt Torrigan had tentatively agreed to take the role and asked if the advisor, me, thought that was a good idea. I stated that I could not endorse any person for the role, but that the board needs to have a chief in place ASAP because Chief Slowly's agreement expired at the end of the day. I stated clearly to the board that they are prohibited from not having a chief in place and should take steps to appoint a chief of police as soon as possible. That is what Mr. White's advice to you was?
Yes.
And you talked about the various complaints that you heard about in the Ottawa Police Service, which you described as a poisoned environment, I think? Mm-hmm. Right. And I take it, in spite of those concerns, you took no steps to investigate whether that was true or not true.
We had taken a lot of steps to delve into the significant issue of workplace sexual violence and harassment inside Ottawa Police. We hired Janice Rubin from Rubin Tomlinson in Toronto. We conducted a 10-month investigation into what was happening inside Ottawa Police with a view to improving the work environment and the culture.
Sure. That related to issues of sexual harassment and sexism in the workplace, correct?
And harassment in the workplace.
Right. And so you did nothing to investigate the specific poisoned environment that apparently you heard about from others and from Chief Slowly. And in your capacity as board chair, you did not investigate.
We forwarded specific concerns to the OCPC for investigation.
And you had not, and there had not yet been any investigation. Is that correct?
We had not received a report from the OCPC
so
as
much.
to the outcome of their investigation, but it's not the board that investigates themselves. It forwarded to OCPC for investigation.
And so, of course, until you have some sort of investigation, you don't know. You're operating on rumors and innuendo and hearsay, right?
Well, you're operating on perhaps allegations, but they're unsubstantiated until the outcome of an investigation.
And so you indicated that you heard that there was some issue with respect to Deputy Chief Bell. No particulars were provided, and you never investigated that, correct?
Well, we didn't have time to investigate that, but I had heard that Deputy Chief Bell was involved in some of that, yes.
And so you thought it was okay to tarnish his reputation and what he had done without any investigation into that?
I don't think I was tarnishing Deputy Chief Bell's reputation, with all due respect. I mean, I felt that we were making a good decision at a very difficult time, and the way I saw it at the time is we were preserving Deputy Chief Bell's reputation.
And you indicated that ultimately Chief Slowly was right, proved to be right?
I believe he was.
Right. And so, and yet when you spoke to the mayor, you recounted that when you spoke to Deputy Chief Bell at the time, and he said to you he would not have done something different, you thought that was a mark against him. And yet you're saying Chief Slowly was correct.
No, this is the Ottawa Police's attorney.
Well, it turned out that what he had identified early on as the resource requirement to end the occupation of our city was quite
Now you're
correct.
going to use that language
In the
again
midst
to get
of
sympathy.
that chaos that our city was facing,
You missed so much.
I was wondering if there was more that could be done, and I phoned Chief Bell. He had a lot of experience inside the Ottawa Police Service, to ask him, frankly, what he might do different, and he said nothing.
And in fact, what he said was that changing the leadership would not be a good thing to do at this point. You phoned him before you'd made the deal with Chief Slowly. You asked him about it, and he showed that he was loyal to the chief. And he said it would be destabilizing to now change leadership, correct?
Yeah, I think that's fair.
What a joke. What do you think, Daisy? Do you know what they just talked about?
And you talked about allegations of racism.
Okay, let's go back to this. This is too riveting for commentary.
Yeah.
I don't think I talked about it. I think I answered a question about it.
And again, am I correct that you had no particulars of it? You weren't faulting anybody. It may be a systemic issue in policing. Is that fair?
Yeah, it was just my observation of what Chief Slowly faced when he got here, racist memes, other things I'm sure you're familiar with that made it very difficult for him early on in his tenure.
And as a result, you entered into an agreement to pay Chief Slowly how much money to terminate his contract?
So, Commissioner, I'm sure there are 1,000 people who want to be heard on this issue. I have no idea how that could possibly be relevant to the mandate of the commission.
Oh,
I don't see why it isn't.
That's not the test.
Well, the test is, it's a pretty broad mandate, Commissioner.
Now she's laughing that she gets a bit of air.
You're looking into all of the circumstances. We've looked at whether the service had enough resources. You're going to look at how they expended their funds, the decisions they made during the convoy. I submit that it may indeed be relevant about an expense that the board occurred at a time when this was going on, and it was a rather, I suspect, significant expense.
I'm sorry, I've missed something. You say the commission is to look into the expenses of the city?
No, sorry, perhaps I wasn't clear. What I said is that or what I intended to say was that
This
the
is falling
commission will be
apart.
looking into
This is
the
falling apart
circumstances
on day
that
5.
led
Can you
to
imagine
the
when real
Emergencies
witnesses
Act.
get on there?
You're looking
This is
at
going to
what
be a
was
shit
going
show.
on in the
This
Ottawa
is going to be
Police
a
Service.
cataclysmic
You're
shit
looking
show.
at what happened at the
My
Ottawa
God.
it is a
Police
shit show.
Services Board.
Oh,
and
it's
it
gonna-
seems
it's
to me
unbelievable.
That in
Stand by,
looking
you got
at
some.
that issue,
Stand by.
it may be
Revolution's
relevant
coming.
to
This is day
determine
5. And look at
what
Dianne Deans'
funds
face,
the
eh?
board
She can't-
expended
I used to
at
kind of
this
like
time.
her way back when.
I don't see it as any, having any relevance, the amount that was paid.
Or at least I
think
liked
it's
her
been
name.
In evidence that he
Put
was
us
paid
on the side,
severance.
John.
And I don't
On the
think
side, it makes the
we,
screen
I
smaller.
don't see the relevance
Oh, does
of
it?
going any further.
Yeah, look.
That's fine, thank you.
Shrinks it.
You
Little bit.
indicated in one
And
of
by the way,
put
your
us on the
time
side.
is up.
if I might just have 2 more minutes.
Thanks.
I'll give you a minute and a half.
Whole minute and a half.
She's laughing now. She's laughing now after being
One of the things you
eviscerated.
said in your
such a
conversation
fake
with the mayor
smile and
was
laugh.
a lot of people don't support Steve Bell, correct?
Totally. Correct.
Yes.
And you would agree with me that a lot of people did not support Chief Slowly either.
I gotta say,
Yes.
So I
didn't
believe
support-
they
So
played.
those kinds of things are not really things that you can take into account in making
Does that make them a
decisions.
racist?
Well, I think what I was referring to in that conversation is the reason that the board had decided to go outside with the temporary hire.
To be the fall guy.
And
to be
finally,
the fall guy.
Yes.
my
Yes.
Is what you said in the phone
question,
call.
to you
To protect Steve Bell's.
is,
It's in Steve Bell's interest, you said.
in retrospect, because we have not had the full review that Chief Bell indicated would take place, you would agree with me that we really do need to examine what went on, why it went on, and ultimately how to prevent it for the future. We don't know who is responsible for that.
Yeah, I would agree with you that there needs to be a full
Absolutely, Crystal.
examination. We need to
This was
learn
becoming
from
criminal.
this.
She
Thank
violated
you.
the
We
Privacy
repeat it.
Acts, I
Thank you very
believe, by
much.
recording a conversation without
Thank you.
consent.
You
can't
came
do
under
that.
time.
Can't just record
Okay,
unconsensual
next
conversations
is
like that. It's
the
an ethical
convoy
issue
organizers.
for sure, especially for somebody as a representative of the city. Oh, now Brandon's going. Oh God, God help her. Oh, she just, her soul just left the room. I seen the water vapors. Her soul just left the room. Here comes Jim Appel Brandon. After that, oh God, God have mercy.
Share, people. Share.
Council for
Get everyone in here.
Freedom Corp, which
Yeah,
is an
I'm
organization
sharing it
that
out.
was incorporated to represent protesters who were in your city in January and February of 2022. First off, though I am not from here, thank you for your service as the
Oh, my
police
God.
commissioner, or we call it the police commissioner back home.
Oh, that's such a
Thank you
fake
very much.
smile.
I just want to start off, of course, we didn't get the recording until this morning. In that recording of your conversation with Mayor Watson.
Oh, that was
you
her
said you had
recording.
been contacted by someone within OPS who had been called off under the interim chiefship that was then in place of Steve Bell. Can you kind of explain that for me?
Yeah. A senior officer inside police had phoned and shared his version of events with me, sort of just informing me from his perspective what was happening. He said that the day of that particular planned event, that the incident commander was changed that day. and that there was some internal disagreement, and it led to the end of that particular operation.
Okay, and so I'm just going to have to ask you to clarify, what is the event and what is the operation you speak of?
It was a planned takeout of the intersection of Sussex and Rideau.
Okay, so the plan that got canceled so that my clients could move on and then, oh, well, that confirms what I was looking for. Thank you. Did you know about the tripartite meetings that the mayor was having with federal government elected officials on February 7th, 8th, and 10th of 2022 at the time?
No,
He didn't tell you about that?
no,
Okay, and so obviously you weren't invited.
I was not invited, no.
Right, and of course, that meeting was about police resources.
Yes,
Right, and you're the chair of what you'll call the commission, the Ottawa Police Service Board.
correct,
And so you run that board that decides how to dole out resources to the police, right?
right.
Okay. And did you know that on January 30th, 2022, Chief Slawley had asked the city, and the city somewhat agreed to get an injunction? Were you aware of that?
On what date?
January 30th, 2022.
It's all a little foggy. There was definitely discussions
There's
about
some
injunctions.
nuances,
that didn't
some
move
specificity
forward.
to the
I don't
words.
think I can confirm
you say it in
for you
French?
exactly the dates.
Okay.
Let's go, let's go, let's go!
The injunctions that you did discuss, did you ever discuss that the terms of that injunction would be to both remove the trucks and get the honking to stop? Is that fair?
I don't think I had that level of detail, no.
Okay. Did Chief Slawley ever tell you in any of your conversations that on January 31st, 2022, RCMP Commissioner Brenda Lucky told him not to get the injunction because it would be an official movement to another stage, that it would involve the whole country, and that anything official will spark a national response? Did he ever say that to you?
Not to the best of my recollection.
I'll ask him and Commissioner Lucky then. So you did not know that, but you did know that the Federal Police Service, the RCMP, had been involved in the matter in dealing with the protesters?
Yes,
Okay. And to your knowledge, after January 31st, 2022, did Chief Slawley
can you fill our
ever
hat?
advise to get an
Can you fill
injunction
our hat?
still after that point?
The hat. Right, put it in,
there
in
were,
here.
I believe, I mean, the timeline's just a little bit all meshed together in my mind, but I believe there were still ongoing discussions.
Okay. And to your knowledge, I just want to make this clear, because I know that you were in sort of a vacuum. So, but you did know that from January 25th to February 14th, 22,
Man, she's
that there were
uncomfortable.
multiple police services involved in dealing with this matter,
Yes,
right? And that included the Ottawa Police Service, the Ontario Provincial Police, and the RCMP,
yes.
among
And
others that you
among
subcontract.
others, yes.
Right. And I take it that you know as well, at the federal level and the provincial level, it's not politicians that decide where to execute or carry out
I
and
feel bad
apply
for her in a
police
way,
resources with respect to
to be
events and
honest.
investigations, but it's the police
A very
agency
small
itself,
part of
they're
me.
independent. Right. And to my knowledge as well, and I wanted to put this to you, is there any prohibition on yourself or members of the Ottawa Police Service Board of Council contacting someone like Commissioner
What a
Lucky or
mess.
the Commissioner of the OPP to have a discussion about resources?
I don't believe there's any prohibition doing that. I think the protocol, though, would be that politicians speak to politicians and police
Yeah, I hear you.
officers speak to police.
Hey, tinfoil.
Right, but
We had some.
is it true with the commission that you do invite sworn members of police agencies like the OPP and the RCMP to meet with the Ottawa Police Service Board at times? And you have in this case too, I believe.
Yeah,
Right. So is it fair to say that there was nothing stopping the Ottawa Police Service Board from asking for any of the commissioners from the OPP or the RCMP to come before them in order to have a conversation about resources?
Yeah, I think
Do you
that's
have-
fair to say.
Okay.
HD.
Can I ask, just, and I'm not trying to poke, but why wasn't that done?
Yeah, I've been asking myself that question too. I mean, I don't know. I mean, if I were doing it again, would I do that? Probably yes. But at the time, we were receiving information through the channel of the police service, and that was our primary source of information.
Okay. And you'd already discussed the company Navigator a little bit, and it was in the news, and I know they contacted you. When was Navigator retained for the Ottawa Police Service? Do you remember?
Months and months previous to this event. I mean, the board had given a direction to the police service to amp up the communications function because we felt that it was quite inadequate. But they came back to the board with, I mean, I'm not going to get this entirely right, but the sentiment was, we don't have time to amp up because we don't have enough people to do that. So we just need to hire some help for now. And they wanted to hire Navigator because they had some relationship with Navigator. And so they chose, I know they're a crisis communications firm, but they were also providing regular communications advice to Ottawa Police.
Okay, because how it was seemed to have been spun in the media is that they were hired specifically due to Chief Slawley not being able to deal with this.
Yeah, no, that was
That
not
was
the
done
case.
way in advance.
Way in advance.
Okay, that's good. I just wanted to know that. And then I understand that when the retainer did happen, and it's good to know it was that far away, if what I'm about to ask you is correct. I understand the retainer with Navigator was $75,000 on a fee-for-service basis, but it was maybe not paid up front, but it was a $75,000 cap, which is usually less than what their normal retainer of $100,000 is. Is that about accurate?
I don't know if I actually knew what the details of that retainer were.
Okay. Now, I also understand the Ottawa Police Service had retained the assistance from a company called Advanced Symbolic Inc., also known as ASI. Are you
Yes.
aware of that? When was ASI retained?
Certainly in advance of this occasion. Chief Slowly had brought a representative from ASI to the board, basically to talk about the benefits of ASI, and he felt that there was that their services could be useful.
Okay. And what was ASI doing for the Ottawa Police Service exactly? Could you explain that? I have an understanding, but I'd like you to explain it.
I'd like Chip Slowly to explain it, if you don't mind, because
My God, that's a nervous laugh.
I mean,
She is nervous.
my very, very limited
just
understanding
died.
of ASI is that
You
it
just turned
basically
sideways, John.
searches many
gone.
sites and sort of
Am I sideways?
pulls out keywords to create
Well, keep me like
an
that for
impression
now.
of public opinion, if you will.
Right.
Yeah, you're
Would it
in
be
that
fair to say,
case,
when the ASI was discussed
phone
with you,
died.
did they refer to the phrase data analytics?
Probably, yes.
Okay, so they get all this stuff and then they give you in a report or to Chief Slully, the public perception of what's going on so that Chief Slully and his team know how to react, right?
I think generally speaking, that's correct.
Okay. Now, I want to take you to one part, and I'm wondering if you're aware of this, and it's come up in some of the production. Do you remember when it was announced, I believe the Ottawa Police Services had mentioned that they had been in touch with Provincial Child and Family Services about apprehending children in the protest? Do you remember that?
Vaguely,
Were you aware that it was Navigator who told them to do that?
no?
Thank you. Now, I just want to get into sort of your, what you had said. You stated that you had an intention to work together and put aside political differences, and it's good to hear that, and I'm sure the public is happy to hear that as well. I'm just going to have to ask you, can you tell me about your relationship between yourself and Mayor Watson?
I mean, I don't know what there is to tell. I have worked with Mayor Watson for a very long time. We have worked on many files together over the years. I think I enjoyed more confidence in the mayor until relatively recently, until this term of council, when I detected just perhaps a change in Mayor Watson's general approach, and that goes far beyond me. He had, for whatever reason, at the start of this term, decided to build more of a coalition approach to governing than he had in the past. And I wasn't part of that coalition, so I suppose in some ways became a bit more of an outsider than I had been before. But when I had worked with him on like Transit Commission, for example, we were landing a Presto card that didn't work. We worked very well together.
Okay. Could you agree with me that the tension also started when you decided to, you announced, at least to him, maybe privately or maybe publicly, that you intended to bring a motion to fund litigation as against Bill C-21? Do you remember that?
Well, I don't think that's when it started. That was just one of many, many, many disagreements politically we had. And listen, I don't think there's anything wrong with political disagreements. I think it's actually quite healthy for our democracy. So we don't have to agree on every issue. I think the issue is when it becomes personal.
Okay. And so moving on to the issue with the hiring of the interim chief, you heard yesterday, and in the recording we heard, that Mayor Watson claimed that he had concerns about your and your council's appointment of the proposed new interim chief, Matthew Torgan, because there was not enough consultation with stakeholders, right?
Right.
Before Steve Bell became the interim chief, how much consultation was there?
You mean at the very end when he...
Right at the beginning. So when Steve Bell took over as interim chief, how much consultation did Mayor Watson do?
I don't think he did any.
Right. So it's fair to say that the issue that Mayor Watson took with your council or your board appointing a chief on the basis that there was no consultation, it's fair to say he went about it and did no consultation and had his own appointed. Would you say that?
Yes.
Thank you.
Oh,
Now,
this is falling apart for the city. This is just falling
I
apart.
just wanted to cover one point, and I believe it was covered, but just not with the specific association. Because there's two police unions, correct? There's the one for senior officers and then the other one. I also understand your evidence that it was also the Ottawa Police Senior Officers Association, which is those with ranks of inspector and higher, who also did not want Slolly as their first choice for mayor or for, for chief back in 2019. Is that correct?
Yeah, I don't think I really knew that until, sometime after he was hired.
Okay. And with respect to Chief Slolly's relationship, in your statement, you specifically mentioned he had issues with the relationship with the Community Health Resource Center. Can you elaborate on what that was?
Yeah, it was just an observation that I had made through the budget process in the setting of the 2022 budget. The Ottawa Community Health and Resource Centers came forward with a proposal really for some alternative service delivery in terms of addressing mental health calls and addictions calls and housing crisis calls. And there was a lot of tension through the budget process between those organizations that I observed.
Okay, and was that organization, the Community Health and Resource Centers, I take it if there was issues in the budget, it had to do with tension between funding that the Ontario Police Service was getting versus funding they were not, or et cetera? Is that what it was?
Ontario Police Service?
Oh, sorry, Ottawa Police Service. So the Ottawa Police Service was getting a lot higher funding, I take it, they wanted more funding, and was that the tension?
No, I don't think it was that. I think it was that there's a growing perspective in our community that police are responding to calls for crisis situations, like someone experiencing homelessness or someone having an addictions crisis or a mental health crisis, and that isn't always the right response. And there are growing cries in the community to set up a new system where if you called 911, you might be calling for a paramedic, you might be calling for fire, you might be calling for police, or you might be calling for a mental health worker. And so I think there are a lot of voices in the community, and including community health and resource centers, that would like to see, at least an opportunity where, I mean, if you might be dispatching more than one, you might dispatch fire and police and a mental health worker. But right now, police are the responders because they take up that space, not because they're necessarily trained in crisis response of that nature, or not because they're necessarily the best response. And so I think there was some tension between Chief Slowly and the community that would like to see a change in, some modest change.
He is
in
wasting
police
his time.
response to those types of
100%.
calls.
This is a
That was
drone.
very detailed. Has anyone ever told you maybe you should be the chair of the police board? You know?
Not recently.
Yes. So my last question is this. Is it fair to say that one of the biggest contentions with respect to getting information from Chief Slowly
No,
wasn't
not that.
so
We need
much
to
just with the
focus on this
information
quote
based
here.
on
I know we
everyone's
love
public
TFHG,
statements from their
but-
council? What they wanted to know is, can you give us a date when the protest will end? And can you give us a date if it's not going to end, how you're going to remove them? Is that fair? That's really what you wanted to know. That's what your constituents were bugging you about in all the
Yeah,
emails.
I mean, in broad strokes, I think that's fair.
Right, and Chief Slawley, and to no fault of his own, and he couldn't tell you that because he didn't even know.
No, and if those resources hadn't arrived, or perhaps if we hadn't had extra tools like the Emergencies Act,
The Emergencies
they
Act
might
isn't a
still be
tool.
here.
Well, and I understand the extra tools, and I guess we can argue about that. But
Sure.
would you agree with me that if there was a like order to the Emergencies Act to remove the protesters, et cetera, as long as you had the resources, that, based on your knowledge as a former chair of the Police Service Board, the police could have removed these protesters simply with a court order on the same terms. Is that fair?
I don't know if that's fair. I don't think that I'm the person to assess that.
Thank you. I'll make the pitch to him instead. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. The next is the Government of Canada. And as you come up, if I can just be clear, I'm sure you know this, Mr. Mijikovsky, is that if it becomes relevant, the question about salary with another witness, or you somehow becomes irrelevant to this commission, you can, of course, renew the question. I'm sure you know that, but I just want to be clear about that.
Thank you very much, Commissioner.
Thank you.
Oh, my God.
Ms. Deans,
I'm sorry.
I'm
sorry.
Brendan
It's just
Vinny,
so
and I'm
public.
one of the lawyers for the Government of Canada on this inquiry.
Oh,
I'm just going to
called-
try to ask you some, hopefully, less controversial questions about your experience and your capacity as the board chair for this jurisdiction at the time.
Sure.
And I'm going to do so by reference to some of the documents that you've looked at already, but I'm going to focus on some particular facts that come out of them. May I ask to pull up OPB 401624? This is the February 1st board update document, Councillor Deans, which just to situate you, February 1st was the Tuesday after the initial convoy weekend. If we could go to page 7, please.
Somebody's taking some notes, right? Someone? Taking the context notes?
And if you could just move
This has
down
been
a
a
little
wild
bit.
exchange, but again, no care for anybody else, just themselves.
And to that paragraph that starts chief there. Just to confirm what the chief was reporting to you already by February the 1st, a few days into this, was the international dimensions of this matter. Is that fair?
Yes,
And that this is going to have provincial, national, and international consequences. And he's referring to demonstrations already being seen in the United States stemming from this one.
yes,
And he points to the fact that this is coming out of a global pandemic and is a very different scenario than what you saw in November of the previous year, right?
yes.
Could we go now, please, to OPB 401264? And this will be several days later, Councillor Deans. It's the February 5th meeting of the board. And that would have occurred, am I right, on a Saturday of the second weekend?
That's correct.
If we go to page 3, please. I think this is the initial occasion on which Chief Slowly, both in this board meeting and elsewhere, indicates his view that there may not be a policing solution alone to the demonstration. Do you see that?
Yes,
And if we look further down the page on page 3 to the third last paragraph, just a little further down, thank you. It's that paragraph that starts in the medium term there. Do you see that there's an indication that the service in the second sentence is highlighting the need for additional legal supports in the short and medium term and is requesting assistance to find uncharted legal territory?
yes,
And you appreciated that you were being informed that the criminal code powers, the Highway Traffic Act and the City of Ottawa bylaws were somewhat limiting in respect of their application to the trucker convoy?
yes.
Okay, now he's trying to fish the other way.
If you could just go over the page to page 4.
Okay, wait,
in
but she
the
just said,
third paragraph.
she just said that she couldn't speak to that, but now she's speaking to that in the other direction. What a contradictory statement.
The rest of the board did it, that there was an ability of the demonstration organizers to spread a narrative via social media. Yes?
Yes,
And that this was connected to the need for additional legal resources to advocate for legislative changes that would provide for increased powers of enforcement in these kinds of situations. Fair?
fair.
And did you take that as a suggestion that existing legal authorities at the time were, at least in the view of the service, not adequate to deal with the situation already by that second weekend?
I took that they believed there was a possibility that through legislative changes, we could create a better situation.
Okay. Can we go to OPB 401647? This is the continuation of that same meeting, but the in-camera portion of it. And if you could go to page 3 of the in-camera minutes. If you could just move down the page a little bit and just stop there. Do you see the paragraph in which Chief Slowly is speaking and comparing the situation to that of the 2011 Stanley Cup riots in Vancouver?
Yes,
And here he characterizes a distinction here in the last two sentences. He says the demonstration ongoing in Ottawa consisted of thousands of people convinced that the pandemic approach has been wrong, right?
yes,
And that's an approach that was taken by not just municipalities, but by the federal government and of course by provincial governments across the country.
yes, yes,
And he suggests that the service's intelligence at that time suggested that some participants, for them, being arrested, injured, or even killed was viewed as achieving a level of martyrdom rather than a deterrent.
What?
you said that.
Yeah, was that a
Being
serious
killed?
concern
No.
when the board heard that?
Nobody was there to die.
I think all of this was taken seriously by the board, yes.
Could we go to COM 50641? This is an article from the CBC website that appeared on February the 5th, and
The hell? The
I take
CBC
it
as
this
a
was
source?
the same date. Well, that would be the
Stop.
same date as
Yeah.
that board meeting, so probably
It's also
prior to
the
that meeting. Is
intelligence
that fair?
source for the city of Ottawa, right? So,
That's the government of Canada's lawyer.
Yes,
yeah, for the mayor.
if we could go to, I think it's the second page.
No fun, it wasn't me.
Just continue
I
on
wasn't down there to
downwards.
die. I was there to
We're looking
protest.
for a quote
Thank you.
from yourself, Councillor Deans. If you just keep going down the page, maybe a bit further.
With some protesters appeared to settle in with bouncy castles. Did you see that?
Okay, so
Did he-
just at the
did I-
top of the next page, which is
Siege.
page 4, you see
Can
you're
we just
quoted
go
there
back
saying the
by
city's
people
under
giving out
siege.
food and all
We're
this
looking for a
lovely stuff?
concrete
Then you
plan.
get this line,
That is how I
headline,
felt.
underline, city under siege.
Yeah, next
could
to
you
the
go
people
to
handing
the
out
top of the next
pizza
page?
and hot tubs.
Siege, under siege with,
Here,
with
Councillor
food,
Deans is saying
food
people
and
can't
blankets for the homeless.
go to work or open their businesses. They can't sleep, walk, shop, go to medical appointments, or enjoy their neighborhood. This group
this
is a
have to do
threat
with
to democracy. What we're seeing is bigger than just a city of Ottawa problem. This was a nationwide insurrection. This is madness.
Oh, she loves
Is
using
that a
word.
fair attribution of your comments?
That is exactly what I said.
And is that how you viewed things that second weekend already?
It is.
Could we go to, well, I don't need the document. I just want to bookmark the timing. 2 days later, on February the 7th, which would be the Monday after the second weekend, you co-signed a letter with Mayor Watson to the Prime Minister and to Minister Mendicino, right?
Yes,
Requesting more resources from the federal government.
yes,
And that same Monday, February the 7th, you sent a similar letter, or you signed a similar letter with the mayor that was sent to the Premier as well as to Solicitor General Jones, right?
that's correct.
And we've seen those before, so we won't go back to them. Could we now go to OTT 406610? This will be the minutes of the council meeting, the special council meeting that was convened on the Monday evening of the 7th,
Yep,
or afternoon rather. And if we just ask that we turn to page 10, it'll be the bottom of the page, a motion at the bottom of the page. And just so you can see the mover and seconder, but go to the top of page 11 and you'll see the output. This is the motion that asked the government of Canada to take responsibility for policing in effect in the parliamentary precinct, right?
yes,
And you were in favor of that motion.
yes.
And if you go then to page 17
He's no longer
of the same
in that same position. I believe she
document.
still has a position.
and carry down the page, you'll see this motion moved by Councillor Meehan and Councillor McKenney, referring to the Federal Emergencies Act and resolving that the city should enter into discussions with the Minister of Public Safety to see whether the Emergencies Act could be invoked, right?
Yes,
And that's because you saw the need already for additional legal measures from what the service had been telling you to date.
yes,
And you voted in favor, did you, of this motion?
I did.
February 8th was the Tuesday. If we could go to OTT 405837. And I don't need to spend a lot of time on this, but this is a note from Chief Slowly the next morning, next evening rather. And he's writing in reference to that motion, the first motion we'd looked at with respect to the RCMP assuming jurisdiction over the precinct.
Right,
Right. And if you just scroll down the page for, in fairness to you, do you recall Chief Slowly providing you this information to remind you, I'm sure you're familiar with it already, but that under the Ontario Police Services Act, the RCMP is not defined as a police service, right?
right,
And for that reason, some of these steps that you've spoken about earlier had to be taken, such as having each of the RCMP officers formally sworn in groups, right? And another one of the steps that had to occur was the signing of a formal memorandum of agreement to define their roles, correct?
correct,
And I believe you signed that on February the 8th as well, right?
right.
Great memory when it suits
And
you, right?
if we could go to OPB 50858. This is on February 10th. It's the Wednesday now, ahead of the third weekend after the second. This appears to be an email from Julia Keast of your office,
Yes,
and you are one of the addressees, and it is approving a request, if you want to scroll down the page, It reflects you approving a request to delegate the authority to swear in up to 400 members of the RCMP, correct?
Correct.
And the last thing that would need to happen in that regard was the approval of the Solicitor General for those officers as well, right?
Right.
Okay. If we could go now to OPB 401272. This will be February 11th, the minutes again of the board meeting. And these will be the public minutes. That will be the Thursday ahead of the third weekend, right?
Yes.
Oh, excuse me, the Friday.
Friday.
If we could go to page 3 to the second last paragraph. It was emphasized again to you by the service, if I'm understanding this right, that there was a number of different reasons that individuals were demonstrating and no one particular line of thinking, right?
Right.
The demonstrations had become or continued to become a local, provincial, national, and even international issue.
Yes.
And the service was concerned about money and supports coming in from other countries, including the US.
Right.
If we could go to page 4 in the third last paragraph.
Concerned about funding, but it's been shown numerous.
There you'll see the note that the service had been in conversation regarding the mitigation of risks
I
associated
have
with counter
evidence
protests.
of that.
You see
Well,
that?
I have things here. Boom.
No.
Here it comes.
It's right
Oh,
at the-
right. Okay. Yep.
And
Boom.
what that's referring to, if I understand right, is the fact that Ottawa residents
Yeah.
by now
And there was no
are
anomalous
awfully tired, angry,
anything
and
found
frustrated,
anywhere
right?
in the
Yeah.
donations at all. Nothing
FinTrack-
anomalous.
And there was a
FinTrack
real
found-
concern that
FinTrack found nothing of that nature. And were they talking about invoking the Emergencies Act earlier? Did they suggest that Dianne Deans was asking for the Emergencies Act before
Yeah.
its invocation?
Yes.
Okay, when and what?
board
It was.
last
When and what did she ask for it? Did chat catch that? Can chat share that? The stuff about the Emergencies Act that she asked for and what date that was?
was OPB 401648. And to the top of page 4. Thank you. And I just want to point out that again, here you're informed by the service in camera that national and international security blind spots were being pointed to. And due to the cumulative blind spots, the OPS lacks the capacity to address the unfolding situation, right?
Yes.
Did that refer in part or a substantial part to the awareness of the organization of the convoy online and the impact of social media on those who'd come in to occupy Ottawa?
I believe it did.
Thank you. Those are my questions.
Thank you. Next is the Democracy Fund and JCCF.
Ooh.
Could be good.
Boom. Here I am. Does anyone have the playback for that? I'll try.
Caught a little off guard there. And for the sake of the sign language interpreters, who I'm sure I tortured a little bit yesterday, I'll try and go a little more slowly today. Good afternoon, Councillor Deans. I'm Rob Kittredge. I represent the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms. As someone who is caught up in, as you put it, what happened in Toronto during the G20 and in some of the more egregious events addressed in the Morden report, I was encouraged to hear that you did your best to prevent similar mistakes and overreach in Ottawa. And in furtherance of that goal, you felt that you and the OPSB might have been able to intervene to help with OPS requests for assistance from other police forces or various levels of government. Is that correct?
That's correct.
You understood the OPS's expressed need for, quote, additional resources to mean that they needed additional police officers, correct?
Yes. After that February 5th meeting, when Chief Slowly outlined his resource requirement, not all 1,800 were uniformed officers. Some were civilian, but he made that clear at that time.
Right, but it was essentially people on the ground that
Yes.
you meant by resources.
Skilled resources, yes.
Did he use the word resources to refer to anything other than people on the ground?
You mean like weapons, or what are you
No,
suggesting?
like, I guess I'm just getting at the point that we've heard the word resources a lot today, and I just want to understand what that means.
Yeah, I think by and large it means skilled, trained people.
Right. While we've heard that the criminal code, existing bylaws, et cetera, may have been somewhat limiting, the OPS didn't express to you any specific need for any specific additional legislated powers, did they?
I do not believe so.
And your understanding was that while legislative change may have been useful to police, it wasn't required, strictly speaking. Is that a fair characterization?
I don't know the answer to that question. I
Yeah, but
mean,
she knew it
will
the
be
other way.
required, and it might be something's very useful. But in the moment, it probably wasn't going to happen.
Right. Do you feel that OPS was making effective use of the resources, personnel, and equipment that they had available to them at all times during the protest?
I'm probably a question much better put to Chief Slowly, because as we've made pretty clear, I'm not involved in the day-to-day operation.
Right. As a citizen of Ottawa, were you satisfied with with the use that they were making of the resources, personnel, and equipment that they had available to them?
Yeah, another kind of difficult question to answer, because, was I satisfied with the response the whole way through? No, I was not. But did that mean they weren't using their resources wisely? I couldn't answer that question with any degree of certainty. I was aware that they did not have sufficient resources.
Fair enough. And a similar question that I suspect will get a similar answer. Did you feel that the OPS was effectively enforcing existing laws and bylaws at all times during the protests, given the resources available to them?
I was frustrated with some of the enforcement efforts, especially getting calls from constituents and other members of council about enforcement. I understood the reasons that were given to us, that they had to put public safety first and the safety of the bylaw officers and their officers first. I certainly understood it, but from a public perspective, it was frustrating.
We've heard that during the protests, there was an amendment made to the city's idling bylaw. Can you tell us what the time frame for making that change was, how quickly it was able to be done?
It was done quite quickly, I believe. I can't tell you exactly how long it took,
Would it be something on the order of a day?
possibly.
Would it be fair to say that if the OPS required further bylaw amendments, these could also have been put in place very quickly?
Yes.
And in light of us having reached a reasonable set of agreements on my questions a few questions ago, I'll skip this one. So how would you say that the tension between yourself and the mayor interfered with the resolution of the protests? We've heard a lot about the fact that there was tension, but how did it interfere with resolution?
As I said earlier, I believe that everyone needed to be working together. You can equate that to a team sport of kicking the ball up and down the field in two different directions, and you're on the same team. You're probably not getting where you need to go. And I don't think it was just the mayor and myself. I think that there were, just listening to the evidence about the information that was shared with the City of Ottawa and not shared with the police board is frustrating to me. We all needed to be on the same team. And I think, I'm not going to center out the mayor for special attention. I just think that, and possibly part of it was
you already,
the
buried the mayor
pandemic, and we
alive.
weren't all in the same room. We weren't all operating out of City Hall. I was operating out of my home the entire time. And,
Must be nice
you
for
know,
you, Mayor.
perhaps
for
some of
you,
it was
Dianne.
that too, because when you're not together, you're not getting that same dynamic as if you're all in the same room. And there might have been some of that too.
And in that, I understand there was some tension between Chief Slowly and Bill Blair, and also some infighting at the OPS that may have also contributed. Is that fair to say?
I think it's fair to say that we weren't all in the same boat, rowing in the same direction at all times.
First, it was
It
the
wasn't
sports field
optimal.
kicking the ball. Now we're rowing the boat.
All right. You would hope that Ottawa would avoid the sort of mistakes and overreach that occurred under then Chief Bill Blair's command at the Toronto G20 in 2010. But OPS didn't really have a plan to deal with the protests. The city lost control of its streets, and in the end, a national emergency was declared. And here we are, hard at work on Ottawa's own version of the Morden Report. As much as well-intentioned people like yourself tried to apply lessons from Toronto's G20, you weren't able to prevent mistakes and overreach on a similar scale, were you?
Not entirely, no. Maybe we made different mistakes. If you don't learn from your mistakes, you risk repeating them, and I think that's the benefit of all of this. Hopefully, we're going to learn from our mistakes, and the next time something happens, it will go smoother than it did this time.
Right. But this time, the crisis was mishandled by police and all levels of government, wasn't it?
I think we could have done better.
Thank you very much. Those
You're
are my
welcome.
questions.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have the National Police Federation.
Commissioner, they've advised Commission Council that they're ceding their time.
Okay. So we're now back to the final, the Ontario Police, the Ottawa Police Services Board. Do you have any re-examination?
None whatsoever. Thank you very much.
I think the city of Ottawa had some time.
It did, and I skipped you.
Oh,
I
apologize. Go ahead.
City of Ottawa
No
lawyer.
problem.
Holy smokes.
Alyssa Tompkins, counsel for the city of Ottawa.
Thanks,
Councillor
Alex, for those
Deans,
links. That's great.
am I correct that your evidence was that the first time you heard that resources were being held up was because Chief Slowly did not have a plan for the resources, was when Mr. Canalacos said it on Monday?
Yeah, I believe that's the case. I had not been told that throughout.
Okay, so Mr. Commissioner, can I have permission to take the witness to her witness summary to refresh her memory?
I think it's been entered, as I understand it, so yes,
Okay,
you can bring it up.
can we please bring up document WTS.000000010?
How's the resolution? Is it okay? This would be a lot better for my note taking. Is this a better? Does this work here? Can you see properly in this, everyone?
I can see.
And Councillor Deans,
can you see
this is
that?
your witness summary?
Yeah, that's pretty clear. I can read that from
You
quite a
reviewed the
distance.
summary and had an opportunity to make any changes that you wanted?
Yeah.
I don't understand.
And you
how that
adopted it
works
this
at
morning,
all.
in fact.
Yeah.
And that's worse or
So if
better?
we could just go to the bottom of the third page.
Looks worse now. Looked better a minute ago.
That's weird.
And that last complete sentence states, according to Councillor Deans,
good.
there is a possibility that resources were being held up because Chief
got-
Slowly
This
did
is better
not
for
have
my
a
notes.
plan for the use of the resources. Councillor, you'll agree that in fact, this is something that you suggested during your interview with Commission Counsel and not something that you heard for the first time during Mr. Canalacos' evidence.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with that because it's right there, but I can't recall exactly what I was referring to in this statement. I mean, the level of detail that I've been hearing through this process and heard from Mr. Canalacos and are in the reports from the OPP and RCMP about their level of concern was never intimated to me. I mean, I may have broad scale heard something, but I had no detail that is now entered into evidence from this commission, and it came as a huge surprise to me.
No further questions.
They're just trying to do something.
Yes, Commission Council?
I don't understand the significance of that.
I think that was it for the,
You just
oh,
can't remember?
sorry.
Could I address you on just one point, Commissioner? The question that you ruled not relevant holds great significance for the board as the employer of the former chief, and we're not a party. And I don't know how we would deal with the possibility of that being revisited. I know that counsel for Chief Slowly and the board would take the same position, but I don't know that there's any, is there some other way to deal with that if the board's interest were engaged again? I may not be able to achieve anything, but I thought I would at least raise it with you.
You can raise it. I think Chief Slowly's counsel, or former Chief Slowly's counsel would raise the issue if it is brought up, as I understand it. I just was pointing out the normal routine, and if it becomes relevant, I'm not sure how we would deal with it. It was simply there because when Chief Slowly testifies, I can't anticipate what's going to happen. And sometimes something is not relevant at one point, but further evidence raises issues. Not much I can do about that, but I'm on notice that you have a view, and I think we can deal with it when and if the time comes.
Thank you very much for your consideration. That's all I have today.
Okay. So that completes, as I understand it, subject to re-examination, because I take it you have no further submissions on behalf of the board?
None
Or
whatsoever. Thank you.
Questions, rather? Okay, so go ahead.
Two brief questions. Councillor Deans, you were asked a number of questions on cross about the information you received. Do you feel that the board received the information it required to exercise its oversight functions?
I believe the board could have done a better job in exercising its oversight function if it had been provided with relevant information that it did not receive.
And we listened to the recording. There's a number of questions about that as well. In your view, did the mayor interfere with the board's autonomy by exerting pressure on the chair? The mayor fell short of directing me not to do something, so that clearly would have been interfering with the board. I think that the mayor and council came very close. The mayor made some public statements that he was going to ask Matt Turigian to step aside and put Chief Bell into place. And I think the Police Services Act, there is some draft legislation that hasn't been proclaimed yet that would preclude that type of interference in the work of the Police Services Board and not allow that kind of political interference by a council or a mayor. So I think it was very close to the line, yes. Did you feel like it was undue pressure was being imposed on you?
Well, I understood the consequences being imposed on me. That was pretty clear. But I've always felt this way. I'm there to do a job, and I have to do the job to the best of my ability. Okay. And if I believe, and I believe that I have the most information, that is in the best interest of the community, then I need to do the job and not be unduly influenced by political pressure.
Thank you, Councillor Deans. Thank you, Mr. Commissioner.
Okay, so I think that ends the testimony of Councillor Deans. Thank you very much for your evidence, for coming forward, and as was said earlier, for your service. We're going to go take a 15-minute break until we move to the next witness. It looks like it'll be another late day, so people should prepare in consequence. Not sure how late we'll go because what we don't get done today will be added to tomorrow. So 15 minutes We'll come back at 25.
Did you hear that,
after
Casey?
4. Thank you.
Did you hear
The
that?
commission is in recess for 15 minutes. La commission levée pour 15 minutes.
And just one last, I just want to thank council for having worked out the potential issues.
Okay, you're eating
It's
into our break,
appreciated,
Commissioner,
and
please.
resolution is always appreciated with respect to time and disputes. Thank you.
Oh my God. Oh my God.
Well. Okay, tech support will be there in a sec.
Tech support?
Oh, no, sorry. I didn't realize my. Hey, hello, everyone.
Somebody's
That's Dianne Deans. There we go. Dianne Deans, ladies and gentlemen.
Dianne Deans, whose career might be over.
Yeah, it's not looking good from any of the comment. Not only on here, man, but like the comment threads are not favorable.
Did you catch any of that stuff?
What's that?
Did you catch any of those things? Did you catch the groundbreaking stuff there?
Oh, some of it. I haven't been taking.
Pause.
Yeah, I haven't been taking notes.
Pause.
Maybe if do you have notes, John? Maybe you want to do a quick summary and then I can respond.
So Dianne Deans with OPS lawyer. So the bombshell was obviously the phone call that she had with Mayor Watson that she herself recorded. Are we still good here? You can still hear me?
Yeah, I got you.
Okay, so it was the bombshell that she had recorded herself with Watson, which is it's legal because Canada is a one-party consent. So if you're in a phone call and the one person in the phone call consents to recording it, which is themselves, then obviously they can record you without informing you. So I've looked into that, and that's true. But it's not necessarily transparent or ethical to do that, and that was a big exchange Dianne Deans had with the OPS lawyer. So Dianne Deans wanted to bring in an outside chief to take the fall for protest for Steve Bell. But at the same time, it's contradictory because she later expressed that she had no faith or confidence in Steve Bell in particular capacities. So she wanted someone to come take the fall to protect his potential career path, but then didn't quite support him becoming the chief, is from what I gathered from that very complicated back and forth of different contradictions. So bombshell audio just played in the commission of a call between Dianne Deans and Mayor Jim Watson showed that Dianne Deans was trying to bring in an outside police chief to take the fall for the police action in Ottawa. They knew it would be political suicide. She explicitly said that they were bringing in someone outside to do this to protect Steve Bell's opportunity to be chief later. That part was implied. It's in Steve's interest, quote. They knew the police action was reprehensible is my assumption. That's why they needed a poor schmuck to come in and take the fall for the police action and any violence it would bring. And this was well before the police clearing operation that they were looking to hire this wonderful person. Sorry, I think you said it was from Waterloo.
That's what I
come
read.
in and do this.
Yeah.
You can hear me, right, Chris?
That's a lot better now.
Okay, it wasn't good? Hello?
It depends on what you're listening on.
Okay, yeah, sorry, let me see if I can fix that a little bit, guys.
No, that's way better, John. Way better.
Well, I can't be this close to it all the time. Like, I can't be over here. Hello? Hello?
Yeah, that sucks. Yeah, that sucks.
Hello? Can you hear me?
Kind of, yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, that's way better.
Is it okay?
Yeah, it's good.
Okay, so it's the echo cancellation nonsense. That's what's happening here.
So that's one heck of a bombshell, though.
So let me read it through. So bombshell audio just played in the commission of a call between Dianne Deans and Mayor Jim Watson showing that Dianne Deans was trying to bring in an outside police chief to and this part's my assumption, to take the fall for the police action in Ottawa. They knew it would be political suicide. Obviously, this was well ahead of the police action. She explicitly said they were bringing in someone outside to do this to protect Steve Bell's opportunity to be chief later. Again, my assumption, and the quote was, it's in Steve's interest to bring in this schmuck from, I think it was Waterloo that they were looking at. Watson didn't support it. Watson, in the call that Dianne recorded herself, which I think just might have ended her political career. I mean, in a justified world, it would. How
will anyone trust her?
Really, of her and Mayor Watson. Sorry, I can't hear you. I'm just taking this off to explain things. And in that call, that she recorded. It was like she shrunk so much as that call was playing, and she really did become small. And you could see that she was panicking in there, and she had some fake facade smiles. But man, the damage is done, and it really shows, in my opinion, it shows that there was a intention, that they understood that there would be consequences to the eventual police action, and they wanted to protect their preferred candidate for it. Now, however, while she did say to Watson that Steve was, this is, quote, in Steve's interest, bringing in the schmuck, assumedly, more or less how she said it, to bring in the schmuck. He's a really great guy, and this is a really elegant solution to bring in this amazing candidate to be the temporary chief for 3 to 10 months, take the fall for whatever ramifications there are from this, and then we can have whoever else. This is in Steve's interest, and whoever else can become the chief of police of Ottawa without the political baggage of the Emergencies Act or whatever was coming down the pipeline. I'm sure we're going to learn even more of what was coming. And it to me demonstrates intent. They knew the implications of what they were doing, and they were already making plans to protect their preferred police chief from the fallout of all of this. So it highly shows that they knew that they weren't doing the right thing. Because if they knew it was a justified, righteous action, chat, if they knew this was the right thing to do, that they had to do it this way, would they be going to this effort to get this schmuck in? To do the action, to do the dirty work? If this was if this was the right, righteous, truthful, honest, lawful thing to do, would they be trying to bring in a schmuck? Would they be trying to bring in a patsy, a fall guy? No, they wouldn't. They would allow whoever. Now, Steve Bell ultimately did it, and it's weird later, because I believe in the call or at the testimony later, Dianne Deans said that she didn't really have full support for Steve Bell. Watson sounded more enthused about him. But at the same time, she did directly say this is in Steve's interest. Watson didn't agree with the, basically what had happened is former police chief slowly stepped down one day, and by the next morning, Dianne Deans had already had a contract written up with the Patsy to come in and do this. Now, in the Patsy's defense, they're a reputable police chief, but the intention, as we can see from Diane's testimony words, was to bring in the fall guy.
That's here nor there. Whether we would imagine it would be we would imagine it would be a qualified person coming in regardless. But the point is
they're bringing in someone who's going to be caught up in this nightmare scenario.
The point is that they were a placeholder and someone that all the heat could come fall down on.
Exactly. And it was going, and that's what he said, quote, it's in Steve's interest. But then again, later in the call or the testimony, Dianne Deans comes out and is not 100% supportive of Steve Bell, and where not certainly to the level that Watson was supportive of Steve Bell. So it's all very, very contradictory. But nonetheless, it showed that they wanted to protect the police chief. They knew there would be ramifications of this, and they wouldn't be thinking in that manner, in that line of thought, if they agreed in their minds and their hearts that what they were doing was the right, legal, justified, truthful thing to do, right?
Yeah, well, and if they did think that, then, and they wanted this man, acting Chief Bell right now, if Chief Bell would have been the man, and they thought what they were doing is right, they'd want him leading the way. And then that would solidify his position as, look at the chief came in, and this is our new chief. He handled it well. He did what was right.
More or less, that's what ended up happening in the narrative frame of things. But
in reality, now we're seeing the heat, and we're seeing all the different infighting and lack of support
narratives.
Yeah.
They're petty. The mayor's petty differences with Councillor Deans aside, it was just an absolute train wreck, and it shows their intention that they understood that there was going to be negative outcomes from this, and that wouldn't be the case in the political sphere if what they were doing was 100% the right thing to do. Just wouldn't be that way.
Yeah, and this political pettiness isn't the
focus.
Well, and it's not only this one area. I mean, this entire charade, whatever you want, this entire commission has been blame and pettiness and pass the buck pretty much the whole time.
And I found at the end of the OPS lawyer's line of questioning, sorry I missed his name. He's the guy whose voice often shakes, not to be rude or anything that distinguishes him at all. So Dianne Deans was smiling at the end of his line of questioning because he had some more questions for her, but the commissioner kind of stepped in. I think it was the budgetary questions that they just talked about right before the recess, about how it wasn't relevant, how one thing can be relevant now but not relevant later, or vice versa. And she was smiling because she was literally burying herself alive during that. I can't understate or I can't understate how important of a bombshell that audio was. It really changes the game here. It really provides a new perspective on the situation. As every day we're learning really important information that's reframing this and showing us all the different elements of, yes, the corruption, yes, the incompetence, yes, the bureaucracy, but as well that, they were really struggling to deal with this as a political inconvenience, not a dire threat to Canada's security.
Yeah, all their arguments seem to be internal. Like, and this is really an interesting window into how much turmoil and how much more there is going on under the surface internally inside not only the city of Ottawa, but the Ottawa Police Service, and it seems many other areas of government that that it's ego problems, it's infighting, it's throwing, and now they're all throwing each other under the bus. Like every single person is just out really blaming somebody else here. No one's willing to take accountability for anything, and it's all just pass the buck. And I mean, ultimately, these people can pass the buck all they want. The buck stops at the leader, and that's going to end up being all the way up at the top, right? Eventually, and if you're in charge, everybody underneath you're responsible for that. So, I mean, they can keep
unless
passing
you're
the buck.
Justin Trudeau, then you can do anything to anyone and you get away with it, and then you could just people pretend like it didn't happen the next day.
Pass the buck all the way to the top, and then what happens?
And then he passes it back to the Conservatives. He's like, it goes up a vertical pole, and it goes to him, and he just launches it over.
Send it over. It's Trump's fault, probably.
Yeah, or something. That's basically what they're saying. They were insinuating that American money was coming to the protest.
Yeah,
when
and that's,
FinTrack, there's no support for that.
that's been debunked numerous times over.
Theory.
The proof is FinTrack. You're right. FinTrack is that's what FinTrack does. They keep track of funding and anomalies and all that sort of thing.
They said there was no terrorist funding, that there was no money that came in unbecoming from shady sources.
In fact, it was all exactly like you would expect it to be. It was small denominations, like $20-50 for the most part, type thing. And it was from every demographic of Canadian you could possibly imagine, because this really was a grassroots movement.
Oh, absolutely it was.
A true grassroots movement, which is why there's so many parts to it, which is why you can't say just this one group of leadership, this one group. The convoy wasn't one thing. It was a whole bunch of things supported by people from all corners of the country, supported monetarily, supported online, supported in person. There was all kinds of people were involved in supporting, but it really was just people doing it for their own reason and on their own accord.
So it was the firm that recommended for CPS to come in. So that was during Alyssa Tompkins' testimony, or with the GOC lawyer?
Who recommended it?
Apparently, it was the commission. The firm that they hired, the crisis management firm.
Okay, so they hired. So they hired somebody to come in and give them advice.
And I think that firm is actually who brought them that Patsy chief.
That's interesting. It'd be interesting to look into this firm, find out about this firm a little bit. I'll look into that later.
I got more. I forgot the name of them. They're called Power. They have a corporate energy name.
And what are they, like a public relations firm?
There's something like that.
Crisis control, whatever. Spin doctors.
I remember hearing about them. I just didn't note them down at the time, so I forgot what they're called, and I missed that exchange about the CPS. But it's certainly there. But they were the one who. I think they're the ones who found that chief who ended up not coming in, the Patsy, and they also are the ones who made the recommendations to call in CPS, according to Patty, but I missed that exchange.
I took a screen.
Okay, well, Patty, you can send that. So I have a few more notes. So we have Dianne Deans with Brendan Miller time. I didn't really extract anything from that exchange, other than that there was no consultation to Steve Bell becoming acting chief, much like there was no consultation when Deans selected that Patsy chief. So basically Watson's clique was able to levy Steve getting in after, I think that was after Dianne was out of the Police Services Board. So Watson did the same thing as Deans is basically what we learned from that. So that's more to do with their petty disagreements than it is to the magnitude of invoking the Emergencies Act. So Deans in wild hair. Deans asked for the Emergencies Act. Apparently, I don't know. I haven't really been able to follow up on that line of things yet. I don't know if Deans asked for the Emergencies Act or not. Very complicated stuff there. I'm not sure. I think we could have done better, said Deans. That's what the Government of Canada, the lawyer, but the guy who combed his hair, he did comb his hair. He's got more hair than I do, that's for sure. And so I don't know if Deans asked for it or not. I kind of missed the context of that because I'm doing a million things at once here. And we were still kind of expanding on the Dianne Deans audio tape. So I missed that. But it kind of sounded like Watson and Deans may have asked for the Emergencies Act sometime before it was invoked. I'm not sure. There was a letter or something. I don't know. I'll have to re-clarify that before I mention that with any kind of authority or sureness. Deans and Alyssa Tompkins. Dianne is again skippy on the details as per usual. And Deans and the commission lawyer who asked those two clarifying questions at the end, the guy with the hair and the glasses. She said that the mayor he asked her point blank if the mayor politically interfered with the operations of the Police Services Board. And he said that the mayor fell short of interfering with the chair, which is her. So she basically said that he did without saying that he did. So those are my notes.
That's pretty thorough, and that covered our break. Someone in the comments is just saying that Deans did not ask for it. We'll look into go back to it and try to find out.
Yeah, that's why it was in quote. I had it in question mark there.
From what I understand as well, from the testimony from the mayor, he didn't specifically ask for it either.
Superintendent Morris, will you swear on a religious document, or do you wish to affirm?
I will swear.
We have the Bible, the Quran, and the Torah available?
Bible?
I think.
Looks like OPP.
Police officer.
Looks like
Please take
OPP.
the Bible in your right hand.
Yeah, that would be. I have his name. Hold on. No one say. So his name would be.
For the record, please state your full name and spell it out.
Here we go.
Pat Morris.
Patrick John Joseph Morris.
There we go.
M-O-R-R-I-S.
Do you swear that the evidence to be given by you to this commission shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do swear.
I'll listen in.
Good afternoon, Superintendent Morris.
Good afternoon.
I'm going to start with an easy one. What is your current rank?
I'm a superintendent in the OPP, Bureau Commander of the Provincial Operations Intelligence Bureau.
And is that the rank that you held in January and February 2022?
That's correct.
Okay. And I'd like to call up your interview summary, which is WTS 6035. And this is a summary of the interview that Commission Council conducted with you in the summer, correct?
Correct.
And you're familiar with the contents of this summary?
I am.
You have no corrections to make to it?
No.
Okay, thank you. And you mentioned that you oversee the OPP's Provincial Operations Intelligence Bureau, which I will refer to as POIB. Can you tell us how long have you overseen that bureau?
I've been the superintendent in charge of POIB since September of 2021, having acted in that position since July of 2021. And prior to that, I was an inspector in POIB responsible for 2 sections that are relevant to these matters.
And can you give us the 30-second elevator pitch of what POIB does?
Yes. Provincial Operations Intelligence Bureau is the intelligence directorate or bureau for the Ontario Provincial Police, so responsible for our jurisdiction and also under the Police Services Act for issues where we provide specialized investigative services. We have 6 sections within the bureau. The first is Intelligence Operations section, which has to do with organized crime, et cetera. The second is the Protective Services section, which has to do with close body protection for protected persons in the province of Ontario. The third is Covert Operations section, which has to do administratively with the policies and procedures in relation to covert operations, undercover operations, informant recruitment, agent recruitment and handling, and also the operational responsibility for that. The next section is the Criminal Intelligence Production section, which is primarily the handling of metadata information and the translation of information into intelligence. And the last section is the Provincial Anti-Terrorism section, which is a large-scale joint force operation which engages in intelligence operations covertly and overtly in relation to national security threats. Lastly, we're engaged in the integrated national security enforcement teams.
Thank you.
If I could just interrupt, Superintendent, just if you could slow down a little bit because all this is getting translated as you go. So
sure.
I know you're effective, but effective with a little more patience in speaking will help. Thanks.
Will do.
Thank you, Superintendent. You're familiar with the term Project Hendon. Can you describe for us what Project Hendon is?
Yes. You'll have to cut me short, probably. In 2019 and early 2020, the OPP witnessed a significant amount of protest, dissent, some of which caused us reasonable grounds to suspect or believe that those issues would engage in criminal activity or illegal activity that would have a public safety impact. As a result of that, we created a collection plan and reached out to partners in law enforcement and in the intelligence community to create a cooperative, collaborative approach to collect information on issues that related to that. The reasoning was many of these issues, I might say all of those issues, are larger than any specific jurisdiction. So we collected a collection plan, we made a collection plan, we created business rules, and we formally reached out to multiple agencies in Ontario, law enforcement, intelligence. We went further than Ontario, engaging federal agencies such as the RCMP, many components within the RCMP, the Canadian Security Intelligence Service, Department of National Defence, and then other police services were added as we went along because there was impact. So for example, the Vancouver Police Department, Sûreté du Québec, etc. The rationale for Hendon was to deal with large-scale protest matters that impacted public safety. Very specifically, we did look at reasonable grounds to suspect and believe as a sort of precursor for our involvement. In a very practical way, at the beginning of 2020 and the end of 2019, there was activity going on that had to do under the umbrella of Shut Down Canada. It was activity that activists would engage in to have a negative impact on the Canadian economy and on the Canadian democratic system generally. As we move towards February of 2020, one of the major points of consideration was rail blockades, rail shutdowns, which came to pass in Tyendinaga for approximately 3 weeks, emanating from events in British Columbia, specifically the Wet'suwet'en issues and dealing with gas pipelines, Coastal GasLink, etc. We began at that time to engage closely with all of our partners because there were main events such as Tyendinaga, such as British Columbia, but there were also a proliferation of events. And as my colleague, Inspector Bowden will say, and provincial liaison team, it was impacting multiple jurisdictions. And so that is how we chose to approach it. As time evolved, we had several events in Caledonia and in the Mackenzie Meadows occupation, which were relevant to our duties and also had impact for other police services. I believe at that time, we engaged approximately 30 entities. We had regular calls, we had regular dissemination of intelligence products, and we regularly collected information for that purpose. As the pandemic became more pronounced or more prolonged, some of those public safety concerns or threat variants altered. By April of 2021, we noted the emergence of something that we referred to as the Patriot Movement. And we focused on this specifically because it presented different threat components. I will say this, we had concerns. There was very, very little criminal activity. There was illegal activity, and there were impacts that we were facing.
So what's the difference between criminal and illegal activity?
2021, we noted more and more of that activity. I will also say that other factors occurred, such as hate crime statistics that were published in August of 2021. As a result of that, we evolved our collection plan and collaborated with our partners to focus on what we considered to be the primary threats. Our findings, our intelligence, our assessed information was produced to all of our partners in the form of the Hendon Strategic Intelligence Reports. And I believe that was going out at that time to about 32 agencies, and it was going out to approximately 200 individuals within those agencies.
Thank you. If I could ask for document OPP 404571. And Superintendent Morris, I don't know if you can see that on your screen. Is this a list of the Hendon reports and who they were distributed to?
Yes, so I recall this list very specifically. What you note in blue is a Hendon Strategic Intelligence Report or situation report that was disseminated. What you note in white in the first column on the left is a teleconference, because that was regular as well. And then we evolved our dissemination. We had our main Hendon group. On January 21st of 2021, our Commissioner Carrick, asked me to begin to disseminate that intelligence product to 9 police services, the chiefs of the 9 police services, to ensure that they were aware. So that's what you see in one column, the Hendon group. In the next column, where you see the highlight in yellow, the third column is a column I created because of our geographical distribution to keep the OPP commanders aware. And the last column is our commissioner's command team, which consists of 3 deputy commissioners and our commissioner.
And those are all individuals or groups who received the Hendon reports, is that right? That's correct. Thank you. And you also mentioned teleconferences, and so I'd just like to bring up document OPP 401782. I believe this may be a list that you put together as well. Is this a list of all of the Hendon teleconferences during this period?
Beginning on January 21st, yes, of 2022. That's correct.
Okay. And roughly how often were the teleconferences?
Only germane to this issue?
Yes.
We held our first one on January 21st, and then on January 24th, we completed them daily, I believe, with one exception.
Okay. And who from the OPS participated in those teleconferences?
Okay, so that's a difficult question to answer, but I will do my best. We had a dissemination list, which was very large, as I've described. At this point in time, I mean January 21st, we had grown to approximately 300 participants. From the Ottawa Police Service, given that Hendon had evolved since 2020, there were multiple people on the distribution list for the documents, and that same list received a request to participate in the teleconference. We could not go through our entire list from Vancouver and across Canada every time, so we only knew the people who identified as participating. I can say that the members from Ottawa that showed great consistency in their participation were Detective Constables George Boris, Detective Constable Steph Quinnell. At other times, and I apologize, I'm not always aware of the rank, I believe it's Staff Sergeant Isabel Lemieux. The superintendents participated at time. In that case, I mean Mark Patterson, Inspector Ken Bryden. There were other people from events and intelligence that participated at various times, and we would only know it specifically by them self-identifying.
Thank you. I want to take you to one of the early Hendon reports. It's OPP 401600. This is the Hendon report from Thursday, January 13th. Is this the first Hendon report in which the idea of a convoy approaching downtown Ottawa is mentioned?
I'd like to make a point of clarification here. The simple answer is yes.
Okay.
But from August of 2021 to the end of December 2021, there were regular reports, approximately one a week. The discussion about the possibility of a galvanized effort to illustrate to Ottawa some of the grievances and the possibilities of doing that via a convoy was often discussed and was often in the Hendon reports. The events that were planned came to very little fruition, I would say, or minimal fruition. So it was discussed, it was commented upon the reports previous to this. But in this report is the first finite plan that says we are going to do this and we are going to do it on these dates.
Okay, and so that information I think it appears under key information point number 1. Individuals within the Patriot Movement have undertaken to organize through closed communication channels and in-person networking towards large-scale protest actions. One of these actions includes a commercial truck work stoppage and highway slowdown scheduled for January 23rd. Information shared through social media networks indicates some of the participants of this action may be mobilizing from across the country to arrive in Ottawa for a mass anti-government protest calling for an end to all COVID-19 mandates. And is it fair to say that's the extent
Anti-government
of,
to ask for an end to mandates.
Hoybe's knowledge at the time?
Well, I think it's a little bit more extensive than that, but that's just a summation provided for quick reference for people who are reading the document.
Okay. And if we can go down to the bottom of the page, it's a little bit small, but meanwhile, the shift from the government appears to have had little effect on the organizing underway by members of the Patriot Movement who have taken to social media advising truckers plan to carry out their intended work stoppage. And so as of January 13th, was Poib of the view that there was going to be a mass convoy to Ottawa?
Yes.
And what were the sources of this early knowledge of the convoy?
So we had multiple investigative techniques that we were employing. So I could run through them. One was open source collection. And I want to stress that's information. Open source. So I put a lesser value on that at the origin point. Also, we had covert operations ongoing, which you won't see as related in the documentation before you because of the sensitivities. We engaged in a large degree of analysis and at times surveillance operations.
They have a covert
And that's
operations.
primary and source recruitment for covert operations. That information, all of which is information, is collected. And then we go through the collation and analysis process. And then we provide our analysis, which I refer to as intelligence. And that is how we came to the conclusions and assessments that we did.
Okay, and I want to take you to the next Hendon report, which is OPP 401028.
Can you hear me, John?
And that one is dated
I can hear you.
Thursday,
There's a bit of
January
an echo.
20th. So at this point, Superintendent, the reports are being published just on a weekly basis. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And if you see the information in the key information box there, number 1, the Freedom Convoy 2022 and Operation Bear Hug will almost certainly disrupt the movement of vehicular traffic and goods on Canadian highways and possibly at ports of entry along the border with the United States. And then point 2, some participants in these convoys may attempt to disrupt the business of government at both the provincial and federal level by blocking access to government, legislatures, and parliament. Does that accurately summarize the risk as Poib understood it?
Yes, it does. And if I can just add a comment, as a result of the information we became aware of in early January, as reflected in the first report you showed to me, we stepped up our assignments, our taskings, and our information collection in order to produce more intelligence on what we felt was a burgeoning priority.
Okay, and if I could take you now to page 3, there's a paragraph there, further redacted, that there does not yet appear to be an exit strategy for departing Ottawa. The intent appears to be to remain in Ottawa until all COVID-19 mandates and restrictions are lifted. So what can you tell us about what Poib understood the timeline for this protest to be as of the date of this report, which is January 20th?
Yeah, it's an important question. For those not actively engaged in intelligence operations, there are knowns and unknowns. And we key in on those as intelligence gaps. So in this case, the fact that there was no exit strategy, but there were extensive demands being placed, and the fact that we felt those demands could not be met, it meant that they, meaning the protesters, would be there for a long period of time. And I do want to say this might appear to be anecdotal. I refer to intelligence as being engaged in acquiring secrets or mysteries. Their plans while in Ottawa were not a secret that we couldn't discern. The plans while in Ottawa were a mystery until they got there, and I think that is borne out by events.
I think we'll see some reports later. If we could go to page 4, towards the bottom, I believe. So there we go. In addition to the convoys themselves, police of jurisdiction resources could be stretched if rallies are organized at the local level to coincide with the arrival of the convoys in a given community. And so can you sort of unpack that for us in terms of your concern about the police of jurisdiction?
Sure. So throughout COVID-19 and the impacts of COVID-19, and specifically since, I'll say, the spring of 2021, the growth of various movements, and I want to be clear on this, this is not one monolithic entity. These are grassroots, what I refer to as affinity groups that share grievances. They acted locally and also tried to coalesce. And I would say that this was the first successful coalescence. So in doing so, the information that we were collecting and the analysis that we were engaging in to produce the intelligence illustrated that, yes, Ottawa would be the culmination of this, but there would be other factors along the way and across the country, and specifically in relation to specific infrastructure like border crossings, and specifically in relation to what we refer to as the business of government, so Queen's Park, and also obviously Parliament. That's what I mean. And discussion of plans to exceed our resources and our capacity to respond.
And I'd like to ask you about the next paragraph, which I believe Councillor Deans may have been taken to as well. Although the stated intent of some convoy participants is to remain at Parliament Hill until the government rescinds all COVID-19 related restrictions and mandates, this goal is likely to prove unrealistic in the long term. However, even a small number of tractor trailers parked at Parliament Hill will almost certainly be disruptive in the short term. So why did POIB think that it was unrealistic in the long term but extremely disruptive in the short term?
Yeah, I'm thankful you asked me that. They had certain demands. We felt the demands could not be met, but we believed it would be unlikely for them to follow through on the promise to stay until the mandates were lifted. But we did think that it would be a long term. It's just that over the period of time that would transpire, people would become frustrated. People would need to return home. I want to be clear, we felt this would be a long-term event.
And when you say long-term, we're in January 20th. When you say long-term, what did you mean by long-term at that time?
We felt that they would arrive on January 28th to 29th, and we were positioning ourselves to be prepared for a longer term. I don't know that I had a specific idea in mind, but we were even beginning to schedule and plan at that time for, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month, et cetera. And we also didn't know what the nature of negotiations or discussion would be, i.e. in Tyendinaga, that occurred with multiple levels of government. So those things would have impact as well. But even at this time, we were talking about scheduling to have relief, et cetera. And we were engaged in the OPP within our major incident management group to be planning between the various entities that engage in that group.
Okay. I'd like to take you next to the Hendon reports from Saturday, January 22nd. It's OPP 401603. And if we could go to page 2 when we get there. Under the assessment, it says, it is almost certain that the Freedom Convoy will disrupt the flow of traffic and goods along Canadian roadways and at border points. So how is it and why is it that POIB had concluded that was almost certain by January 22nd?
Because the information that we were collecting from open sources and other venues, it was consistent that this is what they intended to do. That's one point. One of the critical points in producing intelligence is the reliability of the source, but also the validity of the information in juxtaposition with all the other information. Traveling from British Columbia or Nova Scotia to Ottawa shows an incredible motivation, and we felt that it would be there for a long period of time. And we felt that for the most part, the entities that were engaged in the planning would follow through on what they were saying.
Why did you feel that you mean the organizers, the
Yes.
convoy organizers? Why did you feel that they were going to follow through?
The pronouncements they made were in earnest. I felt that they meant what they said. The grievances, and I want to stress there were multiple grievances, had been expressed at this point for about 18 months. We had seen expressions of those grievances in multiple jurisdictions throughout Ontario specifically. There were new factors that we took into account. The experiences that were faced during the federal election illustrated that people were prepared to go to further lengths to illustrate dissatisfaction. The experience with the incoming passports that had occurred in relation to COVID-19, the impacts in the workplace for some people and how some people experienced that, the vaccination, I think it was called pediatric vaccination. These were all factors that for the people involved, for the people motivated, impacted their motivation and increased their frustration. And we believe that they would follow through on what they were saying they would do.
If we could scroll down on the page, there's a section called Intelligence Gaps, Collection Requirements. Can you explain for us what appears in this section?
Sure. In any intelligence initiative, you create a collection plan. And when you satisfy the collection plan, then you feel you've filled that gap. But always you have gaps that are still there. The numbers are always a gap. Like, so for example, I've been asked a lot about the numbers. We couldn't possibly know what the numbers would be because until that given day, we don't know how many people will arrive. What we could do and what we did do was reach out to our colleagues in the RCMP through the divisions to get assessments of the numbers of people to the extent they could, the numbers of vehicles to the extent they could, and specifically on tractor trailers, the types of vehicles, the mood, the behavior, et cetera, et cetera. So we were trying to determine the size, the impact of the protest, et cetera. Now that's for all. Now also in terms of being armed, I want to be clear on this. We had we produced no intelligence to indicate that these individuals would be armed. And there has been a lot of hyperbole about that.
This is very
That
important.
was something we wish to, when people think about what happened on January 6th of 2020, that is presence of mind, but we produced no intelligence to indicate that that would be the case.
I understand. If we could go down, I want to go to the last 2 points in intelligence gaps, which are on the next page. Oh, if we just scroll up, sorry.
That was
The last 2
huge.
points.
That was hugely important.
Plan for any further action.
We cannot
Casey, go ahead and
understate that.
interrupt this.
Yeah, I
Go
cannot
ahead, Casey, go.
I cannot understate how important that was. That is, you just stated there that there was no intelligence to indicate that that there were armed people there. Hugely important. Hugely important. So at where are we at? 253. I'll go back and clip that
In some of
out.
those instances, very specific plans are made and followed through or not followed through. Apart from stages, music, speeches, et cetera, we could see no specific plans for actions of that type. And we believed, because of the amalgamation of affinity groups, there really was no specific plan in relation to that. It was a matter of, we call it being
This is
event-driven,
devastating for the
and we'll
government.
see what happens when we get there, et cetera. We had no expectation that their demands would be met. And so we wondered if that would create increased frustration. And then we tried to collect information to produce intelligence on how that frustration might be borne out.
Thank you. I want to take you to the Hendon report for Monday, January 24th now, which is OPP 401608. And I'll take you to page 2 under assessment when we get there. So the first paragraph, convoy organizers will almost certainly have minimal ability to influence the behavior of convoy participants and protest attendees. Why was that a concern? And if so, why was that a concern?
We were collecting information and producing intelligence on the organizers. That was a fast-moving atmosphere of individuals that we didn't necessarily know a lot about, nor do they come from our province. So those individuals may have a plan, probably a fairly loose plan, but when a large-scale protest, event, etc., occurs, there will be a lot of individuals or entities that attach themselves to that protest atmosphere. And then they may engage in activity that has absolutely nothing to do with what the individuals who are organizing the protest entertain. So we were collecting information, which is part of our normal operation, about affinity groups or associated entities that may attach themselves to this protest and trying to determine what their actions may be.
Some interesting stuff there too.
Did POIP take any additional steps when it realized that the sort of convoy organizers weren't necessarily going to have control over the participants?
I can say that we had already taken steps in terms of individual entities that we were concerned about. We already had ongoing operations that would inform us as to what was occurring in those milieu and would they be engaged, et cetera.
If we could pull up OPP 401047, please. This is an email exchange between yourself.
So quickly, sounded like they weren't so concerned with the convoy and the convoy protesters, but perhaps individuals or entities that would associate or try to grab onto the protest. Wasn't even the protest that they were worried about, at least in this case.
On their side to get information from West and East. I can't believe that you had to ask, though. So can you tell me a bit about the
I'm still trying to find the
process of getting
specific
information
comments
from
about
the
January
RCMP
6th.
and specifically
But he
what
said it
that
wasn't
comment
January
was
6th.
referring to?
Our collection plan for this issue specifically needed to have the information on numbers, vehicles, mood, et cetera, that was emanating from several different locations at various times. If I could just give an example, from BC on January 22nd. But it's not just BC, Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba. It's various locations. Also, en route, there were a number of mini events that occurred in Regina, Medicine Hat, Winnipeg, and I'm only speaking to the west because that was the longest period of time. And we needed to get that information. And so we were reaching out, during the Hendon calls to basically create what we refer to as an intelligence requirement for the divisions of intelligence in the RCMP. And the reason Sebastian is referring to it is we did the same thing with the Sûreté du Québec.
Thank you. If we could pull up the Hendon report for Tuesday, January 25th, which is OPP 401609. And so here we're, just to situate us, we're Tuesday before the sort of the arrival of the convoys in Ottawa. If we get on page 1 under information, those first 3 bullet points, I won't read them all, but it suggests that there's 1,200 trucks coming. The Regina Police said there were 1,200 trucks coming. There's another unconfirmed information about 162 trucks and 1,000 private vehicles. And the Sûreté Québec says 1,000 to 1,500 trucks. Is it fair to say that as of January 25th, it was anticipated that the convoy would involve thousands of trucks and vehicles?
It's fair to say that the numbers would be extensive, and I would say in the hundreds. And the reason I say that is this. A lot of the events in the western part of the country were still a great distance from Ottawa and may not come to Ottawa. And there were a lot of localized events where people might just drive and participate exuberantly, yes, but they might only participate as far as Winnipeg. And for us in the Ontario Provincial Police, we are cognizant the drive from the Manitoba border to Ottawa is like a 20-hour drive. So we could not assess necessarily whether those truck drivers or the drivers of private vehicles, commercial vehicles would continue. In Quebec, much easier to do due to proximity in Sebastian in Quebec Quebec City and Montreal. Certainly though, to your point, we knew it would be in the hundreds and we knew it would be significant. And there were multiple convoys because that's the information coming at that time from the west due to the distance to be traveled.
Unreal.
But there were multiple convoys from within Ontario that just hadn't left yet.
Okay. And I'd like to go down to page 2 of this report and to the second last bullet. And I just ask you about fundraising. It indicates that at this point on the 25th, the GoFundMe is at 4.4 million, which is an increase of almost $1 million in the last sort of 24 hours. Was this something that POIB was keeping an eye on and concerned about?
We were definitely keeping an eye on it, and here's why. For any type of event of this nature, no matter what the motivation is, social media has altered the way we collect information and the meaning that we derive from it. We can always significantly discount some of the numbers that like it or say they'll be there. What we noticed in this event and in some other previous events related to these grievances was that there was much more meaning in the support.
Damn right.
And
Damn
the
right
reason
there
that the
was.
finances are so
Because
important
it's your
is
life. Your
money
life
is a powerful
means
motivator,
something.
and this was
Standing up.
growing rapidly. And I can say it was growing at a rate that for us was unprecedented. And so that added impact to our assessment that this would be significant.
And if you can just help me understand, was it concern about what the money would be used for, or is it that the money coming in is a reflection that this is truly there's some widespread support for it and that's concerning, or is it both?
I think it's both. We definitely felt there was widespread support. I mean, I realized that the narrative, going back to the spring of 2021, the narrative was that people who felt a certain way were a small number of people, were et cetera.
Is this guy in the fringe?
So to speak.
Is this guy a fringe minority?
This was
getting
difficult for us
vibes
to
here,
deal with in
chat.
policing in
Yeah,
Ontario specifically.
he feels like he might be
because
friendly.
There was a large degree of support.
He's certainly
and there
being-
were a number of instances. So it spoke to that support. That's one thing. And yes, how the money would be utilized. There were a lot of ways we knew the money would be utilized in our information, fuel and logistics, et cetera. We didn't know all the factors, but the biggest takeaway from the money was the degree of support and the means that would be in possession to make it more long-term, even for things such as accommodations.
So the
If we could
large
go down,
amount
just wanna
of money was a
look at the last
concern to them
paragraph
because
under
it would
assessment.
facilitate the ability
The
to
lack of information
prolong the
related
protest.
to the OPP about events in Ottawa during the period from January 28th to the 29th and on January 30th represents a serious intelligence gap. Information provided to the OPP to date indicates a high degree of planning for the protest, and communications appear to have been open between the OPP and convoy organizers. It is unknown why the details for these timeframes would not be shared with police. Attempts should be made to obtain this information. Why weren't you able to get that information out of the convoy organizers if there was a kind of good rapport with the PLT or undercover officers?
I think the answer is quite simple, because there was no major definitive plan. The organizing went into the convoy, the transport, the participation, but the event, what would actually transpire, was less organized. And I would say that in my experience, that isn't that unusual.
And so
That makes sense to me.
We're now, it's Tuesday, January 25th. By this date, what
And here's my
was,
experience of it.
POIB's expectation about how long this would last?
Well, I can't give a day. I can say this. We saw significant support. We saw significant fundraising. In real terms, we saw that play out in significant numbers of people and significant numbers of commercial vehicles and private support. In fact, our information from coming across Western Canada was not only that, it was almost unanimous in our calls that there were people lined up on the sides of highways and on overpasses. And we even got to the point of talking about inclement weather, that people were there, and we were quite surprised. So we felt it would be a significant event, and it would be a long-term event, specifically because the demands could not be met. And the promise was to stay until they were met.
I'm gonna put my long-term question to you again. 'Cause I
A
don't
lot
know
of
that I
the
got
a lot of the
an
intentions
answer,
were
but
met.
you say
The
long-term,
province is
you
back
mean-
down
I mean,
because of the
not
Freedom
just the
Convoy.
weekend, it's a
Let's
week,
remember
it's
that.
2 weeks, possibly 3 weeks. What do you mean by long-term?
Oh, certainly a couple weeks, 3 weeks. I mean, there's just so many variables after a plan meets a response that I can't speak to that. And I didn't know what the plan of the Ottawa Police Service was. So when I say long-term, I'm going to say, certainly a week, probably 2 weeks, et cetera.
Okay. And why isn't it that it was ever spelled out in that degree of specificity in the Hendon reports to say these people might stay for 2 weeks or 3 weeks or 4 weeks?
Yeah, it's a good point, and perhaps that's something that we can take away to improve our products in the future. These are strategic intelligence reports. There were other products that were provided that were operational and tactical in nature. We felt that we were stating that this will be a significant event and a long-term event, but we didn't say the number of days, and I can't. I played this back in my mind in terms of knowing what I know today. What would I say if I could put myself back on January 25th, to use an example? And I would basically say what we said, but I don't know that I could have put a day to it.
I understand. If we could pull up OPP 401612.
Did you get that clip yet, Chris?
This is, I believe, a situational
gonna be an
awareness
important clip, Chris.
bulletin for the Freedom Convoy.
Flip it.
So who would have received
Which one, John?
this, Superintendent?
Which one?
The one.
So these are documents that
You know
we
the one.
create.
I sent you the link to the one before the call.
So that they are aware
but I
of
need
what's
the one
occurring. And so
where they're talking
there may be an
about
officer
armed.
safety component. It may just be
armed.
informational.
And then
but
specifically
with
the
all
comments
vested
about January
interest,
6th.
It's a way to
I want to hear the
collect
comments about
information.
January
I don't-
6th again.
So
I don't
this
know where those are,
document-
but I'll clip
right?
the other one.
absolutely
I didn't hear it.
It's
would
right.
have gone to
It's in
every member of
proximity
the
to
Ontario
that.
Provincial
Within a
Police.
minute or two.
Okay,
And
stand by.
I have
I'll
an
get out of here and I'll
independent
come back.
recollection that
Boom.
this document was sent with our Hendon report to our recipients. So in so saying, that would go to approximately 32 services as well. We also provided it to the Criminal Intelligence Services of Ontario, so it could be further disseminated. So it was disseminated broadly.
And it would have been up to those other agencies to disseminate it to their officers if they chose to.
Right, they could utilize it in any way they could, parade briefings, shift briefings, et cetera, or dissemination.
Okay, and if we look at the second paragraph under background, I won't read that whole thing, but this is generally POIB's understanding as of January 26th, that there's no express departure date for when participants will disperse or the action will end.
That's correct.
Did, on the Hendon teleconferences, did you or anyone from POIB specifically say, take the next step and say, so you should be preparing for a 2-week protest, a 3-week protest, a 4-week protest?
I like how they use the word protest,
We
chat.
talked about it
I
being
like how they use that
long-term.
word.
We talked about the logistical capacity of the entities involved. We talked about the degree of grievances. Most of the discussion was involved in collecting, just to give you, I would do an overview and introduce it and say what the pertinent issues were for the day in terms of information collection and intelligence production. Then our inspector, Brian Barkley, who was our case manager, would have an analytical overview provided by our lead analyst strategically and tactically. And then we would go to the other entities in basically an order of primary importance, Ottawa Police Service being key, the RCMP being key, and the Sûreté du Québec being key. And then we would do a roundtable for everybody's input, et cetera. Certainly, we discussed this being long-term and what intelligence requirements we would have in order to be helped out. We recognize that the Ottawa Police Service was our primary client, that there's only a few points in time over this period of time, roughly up till February 20th, where the clients alter to Toronto Police Service, et cetera. Ottawa is, and the Windsor Police Service.
Okay. If we could pull up OPP 401611, which is the Hendon report for the next day, Thursday, January 27th. And on the front of this Hendon report, there's a list of convoys, and a number of them, I mean, the first one has 471, but many of them have a TBD. Why is that?
So there's some, I noticed that we were being pressed for numbers. And at this point, I reached out to our Indigenous Policing Bureau, and that may seem strange to some people who are listening, but our Indigenous Policing Bureau houses our provincial liaison teams, and our provincial liaison teams are interlocutors to organizers, to truck drivers, to all of the people responsible for running the protest, and they had established relationships. So they were the individuals who were providing the numbers because they were there to observe them and stay in one place to do that. So at the start, it was difficult, and I believe in some of the cases there was really difficult weather, et cetera. So we made a clear delineation about who would be responsible for which tasks. So on this case, I'm sorry, what is the date of that?
January 27th.
Okay, so that's why the numbers weren't there on that point in time.
Did POIB extrapolate or have any kind of estimate of the numbers as of that date? Or was this is the best estimate there is?
I think in our assessments, we said, it's going to be significant, like in the hundreds.
Okay, if we could go down to bottom.
Could I just make a point? A lot of your questions have to do with preparation and the purpose of intelligence. I just wanted to explain my mindset. And this might seem anecdotal, but it's important to me. Intelligence is made up of two words, inter and legere, and in Latin that means to choose between. So I really see it as our job as the Intelligence Bureau, in so much as the Police Service Act permits us to help police of jurisdiction in specialized services, to inform decision-making, to allow them to choose between operational courses of action in their preparation. So that's the premise under which we were working.
See. If we could go down to, to the bottom of page 4. The first paragraph there, it is highly unlikely that heavy machinery would be transported in the convoy if there was no intent to use it or if some individuals in the convoy did not anticipate that it would be needed. What can you tell us about the risk of heavy machinery and what steps POIB took to gather that information?
Right. So this is a key component. I'd have to put you in the